those are just extended runs, basically. This guy at the controls, and he's going to throw a wide open Tez Johnson. Tez Johnson heading to the end zone. Touchdown, Oregon. 48 yards.
This is 365 Sports, powered by SicEm365.com.
They hand it to him. Touchdown! Georgia SEC champions! As every dog digs really deep.
365 Sports is presented by IdealMRI.com. High-quality MRIs for $497 or less. IdealMRI.com. Your health is important, so is your budget.
56-yarder, the win really not a factor. Snap and hold are good. That one is good! At the buzzer, Clemson wins the ACC.
365 Sports is also brought to you by Texas Farm Bureau Insurance, protecting Texans since 1952.
Udo on 2nd and 5, first down and more. Udo might be gone. Race is on. Past the 40-yard line. Inside the 30. Inside the 10. And tripped up inside the 5.
365 Sports is turbocharged by Unite Private Networks. Find out more at UnitePrivateNetworks.com.
There's Mr. Contact Balance again. Look at Scattaboo go. Tripped up just inside the 20. What an unbelievable first half by Scattaboo.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
All right, here we go on a Tuesday afternoon. Look at what we have in this studio with all the collections and memorabilia. Also, we have the Baylor helmet, also the 365 sports helmet, which I love that color. Paul, the name of the company.
Green Gridiron.
Green Gridiron. And then there's Craig Smoak to the right, or left on your screen. Paul Catalina, opposite side. I'm David Smoak, and this is 365 Sports. We have a lot to get to today. Hall of Famer will be inducted tonight into the College Football Hall of Fame. Dan Hampton played at Arkansas, was also a part of those Bears Super Bowl team in '85. Tim Brando joins us. It's been a while. Tim joins us today at 5. We have much to get to, including Off the Radar, the top 5, and we'll hear from Jared Raja. He'll join us today at 3:40. Here are the finalists. We announced these yesterday at the end of the show. The 4 Heisman Trophy finalists. We're going to take some time here and break this down just a little bit. There they are with Dillon Gabriel, who's been at UCF, Oklahoma, and now Oregon. Had a big game in their win to win the Big Ten title against Penn State. Travis Hunter, the electric dual position player at Colorado, was at Jackson State. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep. And then also Ashton Gente from Boise State. We know about him. And then there's Cam Ward, who's been at Incarnate Word, Washington State, and also the U. Travis Hunter appears to be the betting favorite, according to Vegas. Gente next, and then after that, it's kind of not so sure. Were you surprised nobody else? But they're not going to do more than 4. Rarely will they do more than 4. Did you think that Shedeur might get into that mix at any point? If he would have been, would that have knocked out Ward or Gabriel?
No, I don't think he was going to get in. I think that the attention for Colorado was all on Travis Hunter, and I think Shedeur Sanders is part of that. Shedeur helped promote Travis Hunter as a Heisman Trophy candidate. As a matter of fact, when they brought it up to Shedeur, I mean, he would be like, yeah, that'd be great if it is, but, you know, I think the Colorado team, knowing that they didn't want to especially split votes on this, was pretty sure, like, and I think they all, like, even as great as Shedeur is, like, you recognize the unicorn that is Travis Hunter and how different he is.
Yeah, he's very unique, no question about it. Also, the Scattaboo, his name with the surge. I saw a poll, I think it was theathletic.com, where they did a poll of everybody following the weekend, and he shot up the charts from what was a straw poll from some of those theathletic.com contacted. I did see somebody today in a Twitter feed mentioning who will get a first-place vote. He mentioned Scattaboo, and he is a Heisman voter. because he gave Scadaboo a first-place vote. That's fine, but you're supposed to keep that private until we hear the announcement sometime on Saturday evening.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have had a problem with seeing Cam Scadaboo in here. He had a fantastic year. I mean, Ashton Genty's numbers are just unbelievable. And he sat out 8 full quarters because they were blowing people out. And he's only like 150 yards or so off of Barry Sanders' record without playing those quarters, but he does have more games.
But Sanders' actual yards in his bowl game back in the day did not count towards his total, so he's more close to 2,800, which maybe Genty gets to, depending on how many more games that Boise State plays. Craig, your thoughts about those 4?
I think it's a solid 4. I think that's the pretty I guess Elite Four that you boiled it down to, and I was sitting there trying to think that that's kind of the obvious 4. I don't know that it's super obvious. I think Cam Ward had a really great year, but I don't think he was necessarily like a layup over maybe other guys, but he's in this field, and I think he's deserving of it. I just don't think that he was necessarily like an automatic, like surefire thing like a Travis Hunter or an Ashton Genty was, but I do think he's deserving. I mean, Gabriel's obviously the starting quarterback of the only undefeated team in America, so he makes a lot of sense being on here as well, and I think it's a really nice group. I think it's a really interesting group. I think it's interesting there's no SEC representation whatsoever. It's like the one thing in college football that maybe doesn't have some influence there, but no SEC player part of the award this year. So you've got, ACC, Big Ten, Mountain West, and Big 12 there that'll be vying for that. Not that everything has to be about conferences because, that's a pet peeve of mine, but it's just interesting to note because that doesn't happen all that often, especially when, you're ruling the sport, so to speak. So that was of note, but I think it's pretty much a two-man race between Hunter and Genty. I would be fine with seeing either one of those guys win. I think a great case can be made for either one of those guys, a legit case, and I don't think it's dismissive of the other guy. I just think that it's going to be a hard decision between those two in particular, and either way, I'm good with whoever the winner is. Gabriel or Ward, I just have a hard time seeing how their votes all come together in order to win this award. It almost feels like they pulled up to the party a little bit too late, even though they've been in the discussion all year. It's just mostly been Hunter and Genty here down the stretch that we've heard about, and I do think Cam Scadaboo probably could have found himself a spot in New York had he been promoted a little bit differently, and that's why I brought this up yesterday of, did the media, and I said we, not necessarily us specifically, but in general, people who cover the Big 12 or who cover college football, do they do a bit of a disservice to Cam Scadaboo as far as his Heisman potential goes because he wasn't covered the same way as some of these other guys or wasn't talked about as much. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that nobody just needed to pay attention to Arizona State until like the end of the year because they started off at the very bottom of the preseason standings. Nobody cared about them or really paid much attention to them outside of Tempe. And then as the season went along, BYU was hogging the headlines. Colorado was hogging the headlines, as far as the Big 12 goes. And it wasn't until they finally lost some games and you go, oh, wait a second, here's Arizona State. Oh, wow, look at these numbers Cam Scadaboo has. And it's like, yeah, he's been doing that.
And then got some primetime games too, yeah.
And so it's just almost like it was too little too late in terms of getting the interest levels up in order to get him the amount of votes that he would have needed. But I think he definitely would have been deserving.
You mentioned no SEC players. At the start of the year, Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers were the heavy, or at least the favorites, before the year began. Dylan Gabriel was there. Will Howard was there.
They should have been in New York based on NFL potential.
Yeah, there you go. Nico Iamaleava also was a part of that high group early on, along with Milroe, Dart, Nussmeier, and then Riley Leonard and Connor Wigman. So a lot of those guys, and that happens, they just disappear for one reason or another. How would you, and it is a big deal for the Big 12 in the state of Texas, the Big 12 with Travis Hunter in there, and the state of Texas with Hunter and Genty, not Hunter, but with, God, I just went blank, with Cam Ward, and also with Genty being from the state of Texas. How would you, if you could, in any way, and I thought about this quite a bit being a voter, change the process, if at all, involving the Heisman Trophy?
I wouldn't, I think the nomination process is probably, I don't know how you can get that better. I mean, because some years there's two deserving people, right? Like you can really look at it. There's two deserving people. Some years you look at it, especially now when you go back in history and you compare, you're like, that was the three best they did? Or was that like a lazy year of like, well, these guys were quarterbacks on 11-1 teams, so we put them there, when you're like, yeah, but, there was a defensive end on that team who had 27 sacks in a ridiculous year, but that was the time where we weren't even considering that. I think broadening the, making sure that you tell people, like, you can consider all positions. I don't know if that's emphasized enough. You would know more than me. I would say there needs to be less voters, in my opinion.
There's there's somewhere above 900 voters.
Yeah, I think also it needs to maybe rotate on like a biannual basis. So you get 2 years to vote. You don't get to vote for 2 years. It shortens up the voters. I don't know. I've thought this about the Baseball Hall of Fame as well, just so you can root out people with agendas or people who are lazy a little bit and see how that is. Maybe I'm oversimplifying that, but that's the only thing I would change.
Yeah, I don't really care much about the voting process itself. I think, there's certainly a glutton of voters. It appears that you could probably weed out a little bit, or at least have them on couple-year trials. Like that's what they do for some conference voting, is you vote some years for the player of the year in the weekly awards, and then you don't do it for a couple years, and then you get invited back to do it, that kind of a thing. But I don't know. I don't think there's like a voting issue. I think what I was referring to in any notes about changes would you change the players in New York, not the actual process itself. The one thing about the process, if there ever was change, and things do change, but not always, is do you wait until after the bowl games? Well, now you're talking mid-January, because there's a game that played in mid-January for the national title, so I don't think you'll ever see that happen. And that means some players might get an extra 3 or 4 or 5 games rather than whoever finishes their year up to the conference championship. Yeah, so I don't really have any thoughts on the process itself. Yeah. I think more of like what I was talking about with like what would you change would be like the players invited, like of the group that's actually going. Would you have somebody else you had invited, or do you think one of those guys was undeserving along those lines? That was more where my head was at as far as changes go. As far as the actual process and voting board, though, I don't really have a strong opinion that there's anything that needs to be shaken up too much. It's pretty clear cut and straightforward, and no reason to have done it the way you've done it all along now and suddenly go, oh, well, now we need to do it after the postseason. Well, that would have changed the award on a lot of different levels. I mean, Vince Young's probably your Heisman Trophy winner and not Reggie Bush. So you can't afford to do that, in my opinion. I don't think it would really do you all that well to wait until February 1st to announce a Heisman Trophy winner after all these games have been played at this point either. The award's what it is. It's never counted the postseason. It doesn't need to start doing that now. As much as everything's changing, that's the one thing that can stay the same and be fine.
Cam Ward was second in total yards passing. I believe he was first when it comes to touchdown passes. He had 36 and Shedeur had 35. So I do believe he's a part of that conversation. Miami losing that last game, though, obviously had quite a bit of maybe taking him off. But I think he was always in the vicinity. Like you're on a battleship and you're looking for anyone who's coming at you, right? He always was on the radar. The Scatterboo thing, maybe if he would have gotten a little bit more attention a week or two earlier, perhaps he forces his way into New York City.
And look, sometimes, like Robert Griffin III was always kind of like a dark horse candidate the whole year. People had mentioned he had the athleticism, but it wasn't until the last month of the season where people were, oh, this guy might be the best guy in the season. So there's different versions of the same story, like cycling through to just like some years it's this way, some years it's this way. There's very rarely something we haven't seen at least in a similar fashion before, because they've been giving this award out for a very long time.
There was, when you mentioned RG3, I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to bring that up. You had RG3 and then followed by Johnny Manziel. Those two kind of came out of nowhere. Manziel obviously was completely unknown other than the fact if you were around the state of Texas, and he blossomed in 2012. RG3 was known, but no one ever thought about him as winning the Heisman Trophy until the year that he had, despite a couple of bad losses at Texas A&M and Oklahoma State midway through the year. I don't know of anybody else that came out of nowhere to win it. Burrow, maybe. because of the fact he had transferred from Ohio State. There's a couple of others, but it seemed like everybody else was always not front and center, but in that conversation.
I think there's like maybe a newer kind of category of guys who have either redshirt freshmen or like Joe Burrow, who's a transfer. You know, like Jameis Winston, Joe Burrow, they're kind of the same. Like kind of the same where, all right, this is the guy up on a team that is just loaded. They're also really, really good and put up crazy, crazy numbers. And when it came down to voting for those two guys, I mean, if you wrote in anybody else in certain years other than first than them, you'd be like, you must just not you must not like that Joe Burrow has drip. Like you must, oh, he wears weird clothes. Nope. Number 3. I'm voting for this guy. That's the only way because they're overwhelming.
One note about 2005, if they would have gone an extra week with Vince Young in that Rose Bowl, the phenomenal performance, the incredible game, Reggie Bush that year had nearly 1,000 more votes totals than Vince Young and had nearly 800 first-place votes to Young's 79, I think it was. And that game would have flipped a lot of votes, but you wonder, would it have flipped enough? It should have, perhaps, but you wonder about that, too. All right, Big 12 coaching. We've mentioned yesterday, we'll get into a little bit more, Scott Frost at UCF. We'll have somebody that covers UCF with us tomorrow. Then there's, of course, West Virginia's wide open, and we got a little bit of that feedback yesterday from Ari Temkin and also our own discussions. Belichick in North Carolina, but that's down the road. In the Big 12, is everything but West Virginia done?
Yeah. Now they're just waiting on who that's going to be, if it's going to be Rich Rodriguez, which it's rumored to be that he's going to get one. I couldn't say we know Ren Baker well. I mean, he's on our show a lot. We talked to him. Just from what I know about Rich Rodriguez and what I know about Ren Baker, I don't know if that's a personality fit between the two of them. And I know there's a lot of people that are like, hey, it was great when he was here. But that was, I mean, he's been to Michigan, Arizona, and Jacksonville State since then. This isn't Scott Frost. And even then, that was longer ago than I think people care to realize. Like, Scott Frost had one college job between UCF and UCF. It was Nebraska. That was it.
Well, he was at Oregon. You're talking about as an assistant coach?
No, like...
okay.
No,
okay,
so, Scott Frost came from Oregon, went to UCF, went to Nebraska, and then, he was in the NFL. He was in the NFL for, a cup of coffee, and now he's back at UCF.
After a 2 or 3 year where you couldn't find him.
Rich Rodriguez went and failed miserably at Michigan. Then he went and failed miserably at Arizona. And then he's come to Jacksonville State and done a great job. But that was a long time ago that Rich Rodriguez was there. And a lot has changed in college football. Not to say that you shouldn't give him another chance, but I think that you can do better than Rich Rodriguez. If you're
Pete Thamel reporting that Phil Snow was going to join Matt Rule's staff at Nebraska.
Yeah, he's the associate head coach. John Butler, the new defensive coordinator, the defensive backs coach they brought in. And they also brought in a defensive line coach from the Chiefs.
You'll have to call Phil before he gets under too much of a contract to get him on the show one more time before he's bunkered in with media relations. Craig?
Yeah, good for Phil Snow. That's good for him. Short retirement that he had there. But, yeah, I mean, all the jobs in the Big 12 are clearly filled. We had the whole back and forth with Mike Gundy and Kyle Whittingham that didn't last very long, but in Gundy's case was pretty tenuous for a little while. And then you obviously had a couple of the changes, and UCF moved quickly to fill their position with Scott Frost, and that'll be very interesting to see how that continues on, his big triumphant return. But that leaves West Virginia to go and make their hire, and I know as the days roll off the calendar, that's getting to be a little bit more stressful. And as the days roll off the calendar, and one of the things that we forgot to mention here is that Andy Kotelnicki was one of the big-time candidates, and he is not a part of the search any longer as he put this message out. Thank you, Garrett, that he is going to be sticking with Penn State. So that was a big-time guy, former Kansas OC that you saw a lot of West Virginia scuttlebutt about, and a lot of fans that were warm to the idea of, a coach like him, a young guy, a great offense, rolling into town and giving them a breath of fresh air. But he took himself out of consideration, or whatever occurred for him to put out that statement. And so that kind of killed some of the other talk that I saw, and really has left nothing but Rich Rodriguez talk that I've seen for the most part. And that's been the case for like a good 24 hours now, especially since Kotelnicki's taken his name out. And I know there's other names that are being bandied about, but really it all still circles back to Rich Rodriguez. And I've seen a good number of West Virginia supporters who are ecstatic about wanting to relive the good old days, even though the good old days were a really long time ago, and I don't think people realize how old they've gotten in that time.
They weren't in the same conference that they are now.
No.
I mean,
this isn't like Scott Frost, like a few years went by, and this is like 2 decades went by for Rich Rodriguez. So it's like really different. Like you were in college, you're now planning for retirement. When Rich Rodriguez was there.
Yeah, you guys seen it in newer Indiana Jones movies?
Yeah, I mean it's a far cry from when they were last cheering him on, and so I understand the nostalgia and the success that he had there, and all of those things. I personally don't. I don't have a dog in the fight, so I'm not a West Virginia guy, so I don't have that built-in maybe glowing spot for Rich Rodriguez to start off with. So just blank sheet of paper, I don't love it for him. I really don't, if that's the hire. I know he's been successful there previously. I know that he's had a good little couple years there at Jacksonville State. But I don't know. There's just something about it for me where I feel like this was your big opportunity with your new AD to go hire somebody fresh and bring a new vision. And instead, he's going back 20 years to the good old days to try and rekindle what you were doing in the early 2000s. And to me, that's just not that exciting. But I'm not a West Virginia fan. So, again, no attachment to Rich Rod. And maybe if that were the case, then I would feel differently about it. But as an outside observer, I just feel kind of underwhelmed. And I was hopeful that, they would get an Andy Kotelnicki or somebody along those lines. But I also don't know what Rim Baker's dealing with as far as candidates. I don't know who actually has shown interest and who's completely off limits that had no interest whatsoever. So without all of that knowledge, it's hard to be too critical of the potential Rich Rodriguez decision because he may, in fact, be the best guy for the job in the year 2024. I just think that's a little disappointing because I would be wanting to get revved up for a guy who's a bit fresher and not a quote-unquote retread. Doesn't mean he can't be successful, but it doesn't do much for me personally.
The retread hire can sometimes be brilliant, and then a lot of times it ends in a thud. And coach, like for example, fans, they want something that kind of gives them a reason to get back engaged if they're not. And we know West Virginia struggled with that throughout the year with the disconnect with Neil Brown. So Kotelnicki would have been great. But yeah, I saw where he put that out, and you just showed it up there. Craig, you shared that with us last night, that it appears with Penn State playing in the college football playoff, he's locked in with that. And I don't think it's just for the one game or how many games the Lions will play.
No, he's clearly taking himself out of the job consideration for this cycle. I mean, that's clear by that message. So it's Rich Rodriguez or some ace up the sleeve of Ren Baker that we're not really aware of, or maybe that hasn't been focused in on enough. I'm not sure. I've been trying to pay close attention to Coos and all the other Mountaineer fans out there, but it still all keeps coming back to Rich Rodriguez again. So that's where it seems to be. I've seen dozens of people and maybe a dozen's a better word, not an S on the end of it, but like a dozen people who are proclaiming that an announcement's imminent and this and that. So we'll see. But they do need to kind of get a boogie going here because they got to get transfer portal and recruiting and all that stuff lined up. In this day and age, you can't really waste time. And I know that you've got to make the right decision also, which Ren Baker will do. But, Rich Rodriguez is clearly the favorite and the leading candidate right now.
Well, he left West Virginia, and I know no one likes to see a coach leave. There's always some sour to that and bitterness. He went to Michigan. Now, it didn't work well, but he did go to coach at one of the great programs in college football history, and it's been 17 years since he was at West Virginia. Boy, a lot has changed in that particular time. Dave Aranda in Baylor playing LSU. Garrett, how many players, or do you know yet, LSU, I saw some programs have over 20 players who have entered the portal. I don't think LSU's had that many, have they?
So this morning, the last time I checked, Kamarian Pimpton, the tight end, hit the portal. He's the latest. And at that time, he was, I believe, the 15th player.
What?
The 15th. They're going through it, man. Yeah.
I saw some schools in the early, young, I guess, lower 20s. And I'm like, golly, I know Nebraska's had a bunch. They had another one today. I don't even know if he was on the roster, but he announced he was entering the transfer portal.
I'll give you an updated number here in a second. My
All
browser.
right. Well, we're going to do a full throttle on the offensive side with you and your graphics today at 425.
But just as a, here's the number that they have so far.
LSU?
Yes.
Okay.
Hold on. Officially, hold on, it's not loading. Officially, I guess 5 have filed their paperwork, but there's a lot more that have announced or their agencies have. So that maybe not the best time to roll out the official number yet.
Is this going to be one of those bowl games that if Baylor wins, even if they're perhaps that day better, that there's going to be, but LSU didn't want to be here?
Yeah, I think it's going to be that way. And you know what? I don't give an F if I'm a Baylor fan or anybody who's not an LSU fan. They can say whatever they want to if that's the case. They could very well win this game for all we know. They've got a really good quarterback. They've got some talented players. I know they're going to be missing a lot, but that doesn't mean they can't still go and win this football game. As far as I'm concerned, we worry way too much about what reaction to other people is going to be in a lot of cases. And I think worrying about what some team who's already preparing for a loss and what their excuse might be for that, even if it's valid, is not and should not be a concern of a Baylor fan or any other fan who's facing a situation where, oh, man, well, if we beat them, they're going to say, well, we weren't who gives it? You know what? Who cares? Because you know what? 10 years from now, it's going to say beat LSU in the Texas Bowl, and that trophy's going to be sitting there, and nobody's going to be going, but 15 players sat out in that game. Nobody's going to be saying that.
No.
Look,
no one. So
15 years, I'll tell you, less than a year, less than a week, people didn't care what happened in the Orange Bowl last year.
Does Oklahoma's win over Bama 15 years ago in the Sugar Bowl, where Bama was, we didn't want to be there. We didn't want to be there. When they really started that was another cool SEC trend. By cool, I mean not cool at all. Of, we don't want to be in these bowl games. Did that take away from Oklahoma's Sugar Bowl at all? Absolutely not.
It says they beat Georgia that one year.
Do what?
And Texas beat Georgia just recently, and they had that same kind of feedback.
Yeah, so the point is that that doesn't take away from it at all, and I don't really care if any other fan base is going to use that. Nor do I think that any fan should concern themselves with what the other fan base might say in defeat. Go out and win the bowl game and celebrate it, and if they didn't have their full contingent of guys, then that's the way college football works nowadays. Hey, guess what? You had games this year where you had guys hurt. So not everybody's full strength all the time. You go out and you play who's in front of you, and it's going to say you beat or you lost to LSU. Either way, it's not going to be, but this guy didn't play in that game. So go beat LSU.
And I think pretty much everybody's in that boat now. Maybe not 22 or 25, but everybody's going to have some sort of attrition even before they play at a bowl game. UT Parking, Rich Rod played at West Virginia, was a student assistant coach, linebackers coach, bleeds WVU, thinks that's your man. He knows the region. He also was born in West Virginia at Granttown, West Virginia. Somebody else, Mike, brought this up, that he wasn't so much a failure at Michigan. It's that the alumni base was pissed off that he was the guy that took over for Lloyd Carr, and they wanted somebody else, so that's always not a really good way to start any kind of a tenure.
How many times did he beat Ohio State, and how many times did he win the Big Ten?
I don't remember that. He was there only 3 years.
Yeah, I would say not enough to convince them that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And anything short of that at Michigan is considered by them a failure. So ask any of the coaches subsequently, Brady Hoke and whoever were Michigan men and all that, there is a measuring stick at that university. So, yes, he failed at Michigan because he knew those goals going in and failed to achieve them.
He lost his first game. He went 3-9 in 2008. And they had some rocky moments when he was there in Ann Arbor.
I think we can all agree it was a failure from a standpoint of nobody came out of it more successful on the other side of it. It didn't work out, whatever you want to classify it as. It wasn't a tenure worth remembering, and what it is remembered for is it not being worth remembering or not being a good stint. So that did not play out the way that he or Michigan had hoped for. And it's one of those jobs, actually, that you look back and what are some of the worst coaching hires? And that one I feel like gets brought up still from time to time when you have those conversations. But regardless, that's in the past, and he does have a lot of boxes that you would check if you're a West Virginia fan. I can totally understand why some would be excited by the the possibility of it. I also know that, Andy Kotelnicki was right there, and it seemed like he was going to be the guy. I think for some people it felt really, really close, and I've seen conversations about, did he want to coach through the bowl game and then get hired afterwards, and that was problematic, or it was a salary thing, or whatever you want to boil it down to. He's not a part of it now, so that does leave Rich Rod, who does check a lot of boxes, and whatever's going to get the fan base excited. I do know I've seen just as many West Virginia fans who are like, you guys who are excited about this idea are complete morons. So I've seen it from both sides. And I know Ren Baker's got a really tough choice to make, and we'll see if he, again, doesn't have some other option that we're just not thinking about. But it does feel like all the arrows are pointing at Rodriguez at this point. So if you're somebody who feels like he's a West Virginia man through and through, and that's exactly what you need, then percentages seem to indicate you should be really happy here in the next couple of days. But we'll see. It's a coaching search, so you never know.
Dave Aranda and Baylor 2 years ago had a terrible ending to the year and got smoked by Air Force up in Fort Worth on a miserable day. And that had nothing to do with the weather. It did add to the fact they were beaten and really never involved in that game. Air Force thumped them. And then last year, 3-9, 2-4 to start the year. I have been told many, many times that whenever I've asked for an interview with an assistant or others, that one of the things that Dave Aranda did, and he said this to us even, but not quite with these words, when we had him in the studio, once it was, I guess, released that he's coming back at the end of the year, but he talked about how he had a lot of distractions, that he was trying to be a CEO, a general manager, a head football coach, and even some people's parents and tutors. And that he finally came to the conclusion, and we spoke to Mac Rhodes about this, that he wanted to get to 100% being a football coach. And that's what he wants his assistants to be a part of, too. He was on a conference call earlier today promoting the upcoming game in Houston on New Year's Eve against LSU. And I have not been able to talk to him other than if you're at the Monday press or whatever. And I asked him about how important, after what happened in 22 and how 23 was a disaster, how critical was it, not just for his job, but Baylor football, to get back to being relevant again? And what are some of the things that he had to come, I guess, to Jesus with? Besides the obvious, how important was it to stop the bleeding from the last end of 22 and how 23 finished, and getting Baylor football back in a position of being more than just competitive?
I think a lot of that had to do with just really, really focusing on winning games. And, I think prior to that, a lot of my focus was on what was happening academically, what was happening off the field, how much hours are we putting into charity work? Are we getting any negative reports from professors? My efforts were really there, and a lot of the stuff that we would do, I'd take this January, February, for an example. We would have, team meetings that all kind of tied into that weren't football, and the difference with this year, starting around more than a year ago now, was that everything was football. And so I always, Smokey, I always hesitated to do that because I just didn't, I didn't want to get to where, I don't know, I feel like you're selling out to a degree. And, hey, that's just football wins at all costs and all that. But, we did football from the very beginning, and in January, February, and that's all we did. And, I think I changed as a result of that. I know that our recruiting efforts reflected that. And, you see the results, and so I think it's hard because you want to be able to measure the tenure here of, the ups and downs, but really it's like a brand new tenure, this past year with just the focus and the efforts just on winning. So I think to win, it all has to be about winning. And I think that's the big difference.
Well, there's an obvious difference, a 6-game winning streak. And those are some things that I think at times he brought up last year. But the way he said it was, I'm here to coach football. And he has to have other people around him on his staff to go worry about all the other stuff. And if it's important enough for him to know about it, because he needs to know everything, then that's fine. Others can help do that. But he has, that's what I've been told from inside the staff and also within that building, that he is 100%. Doesn't mean he still doesn't keep up with the people, but it is football 101 from the time he gets there to the time he walks away. And he had to admit that himself. That was getting in the way, all the other stuff. And he knew he didn't have much time to change it.
Well, look, you have to run your program in the way that's the best for you to be successful. And there's no, how many people have tried to do it like Nick Saban but can't? Or, Kirby Smart does it different than Nick Saban, and he learned everything he could. Jimbo Fisher tried to run it his way until it worked until it didn't, and didn't adapt. Dave Aranda's adapted. You can tell that this year that he's adapted. He's found what works for him. Now, is everybody around it going to be all in on that? Because, you may have less media access, or this may not be this way. Look, if the team's winning games, then that's what works for that program and that coach. You can't just say this is how it has to be. You have to find ways that you can get everything done and build a staff that can help you get everything done in modern college athletics, and not be beholden to some sort of college football head coaching manual that has 3 approaches to it. Like, this is the Saban approach. This is the Bear Bryant approach. This is the Eddie Robinson one. Pick one, and that's what works, and then go with that. It's just not that way.
So there's Dave Aranda on the importance of getting, because if they go, well, we don't know what Mack Rhodes would have done, but if they go another year without a bowl appearance, we know what would happen there. Even 6-6, you never know what it was like. So football 101, football all the time, 24/7, and I think you've seen the changes in that, and maybe just enough and just in time. It still took a little while for that to click in before the 6-game winning streak. Baylor and LSU, this is kind of a fresh game. They have met 12 times. 12 times. LSU's won 3 of the last 4. They opened the series with 5 consecutive wins. It dates back to 1907. I did not know it was that deep of a series. They haven't played a lot, but this will be a new game. It's not like a retread type of a game that you sometimes do get when it comes to bowl games.
Yeah, ought to be a great game. It should be fun. We talked about the potential opt-outs for LSU, but that's not going to take away from it for me. I like the location. I like the matchup. I think it's a good opportunity for Baylor. I don't know how much LSU takes away from it if they win this game. I don't know how much their side of it cares, about this game, to be perfectly honest, because of what they've sort of become accustomed to. But I don't think that's anything you care about if you're a Baylor fan. And I do think there will still be plenty of LSU fans there in Houston. So glad to be talking about a postseason game for the program and for Dave Aranda. And you've got to keep this going now, and I think he's very well aware of that. The last time they had momentum, they didn't carry it. They dropped the ball, and they fumbled it, and others picked it up and ran with it, and they found themselves in a situation where all of a sudden he went from a Big 12 championship coach to on a hot seat in less than 2 years because they fumbled it so badly. He doesn't plan on doing that again, and I don't think that turns into 10-win seasons year after year after year necessarily, but I do think now we're going to really start to see his ability to not build a program but to sustain a program, having learned the lessons they learned from a couple years ago. So I'm excited to see what that looks like. And if you go out and beat LSU, I'm sure that'd be nice for him to just beat his old team. And also for these players to say they went out and beat, an SEC team in a bowl game, and a pretty nice bowl game at that in H-Town. So, There's still a lot riding on this for Baylor.
He was asked about that, about the game itself. We don't have time to get to it now, but we'll bring that up at some point. His response to the players being excited about having a chance to go up against somebody in the SEC, a well-known brand, and logo with LSU, and what they said to him when he brought that up to them even earlier today. When we come back, we're going to hear from Shahan Jararaja. We have Dan Hampton. We also have Tim Brando. Off the radar, the top 5, John McClain. A lot to get to. What have we not discussed? Because we do need to stay on time for Dan Hampton at 4. Is there anything we need to bring up here in this opening segment?
Well, Belichick, I mean, that's the big news going around on the carousel was Belichick and the fact that he's got his 400-page plan and all of this stuff that seems to be in the works for him to take the UNC job, including his girlfriend, who people are Instagram stalking and seeing that she's following multiple North Carolina accounts now. So, that's just another – it's like tracking planes now is tracking social media. So that is another clue that maybe this is actually moving towards being a real deal hire. Certainly seems like it's not just a bunch of – nonsense being thrown at the wall, because there is actually a plan that he's put together and meetings that have been had and interviews and all of that. So we should know, like this says, from Ollie Conley in the next 24 hours. I don't know, man. I can see where you'd be excited, I guess, Super Bowl champion, all that. But like this, I would not be excited as a North Carolina football fan to hire Bill Belichick. I wouldn't. I would not be excited about that. I can understand how you could be, but I wouldn't be in this day and age. But I'm definitely interested in what that looks like if that's in fact what they decide to do.
One point, and Paul, wrap it up for us. He's won how many Super Bowls? Six. A 6-time Super Bowl champion.
Well, eight if you count the
Giants as a head coach.
Yeah.
6-time Super Bowl champion that cannot get a job in the NFL. And I don't know if it's because of his personality or he's hard to deal with. Well, there's a lot of coaches like that. But 6-time Super Bowl champion in North Carolina, somebody asked why them? Because they're the biggest school right now that has an opening.
Well, yeah, and look, they are you want to talk about a failure? They've failed at football for 40 years. They have failed. They are the flagship school of the ACC. I mean, when it comes down to the historical flagship school, North Carolina is that school. That's who they are. And basketball is great. Like, they are the premier basketball program in that conference, outside like one of the two. But they have this ridiculous dry spell when it comes to football. And they're seeing that, hey, maybe we're not as valuable because we have, failed to deliver any football champs. So let's take a gigantic swing. Now, part of this information sounds to me like Bill Belichick is presenting them with this, this is how we win in modern college football plan, and this is how much money it's going to take and all this, and this is my binder, so that when they don't hire Bill Belichick, they can be like, look, it's too much. It's just too much. We can't do it right now. There's too much going on. Here's our coach, not Bill Belichick.
Yeah, well, that remains to be seen. The report is he's accepted it, but there's no yet confirmation of whether or not that is a done deal or not. When we come back, Shahan Jararaja, he will join us, and his thoughts about that and much more, and how the college football playoff standings were released. Also today, Dan Hampton, it's the National Football Foundation's awards banquet and dinner up in Vegas. He will join us today. He's one of those being inducted his time at Arkansas. This is 365 Sports.
Pleasant. It's different than any other dentist office. I really feel like they care. And it's not that you're here for 2 hours waiting on someone to take care of you. It's quick and easy, and I bring my kids, and my kids love being here too. They really love the treasure box. Staff is really nice and accommodating, real friendly. You feel more like home. It's not sterile looking. Everybody has their own personalized rooms with decorations and decor, and they'll even have a blanket for you when it's cold. I've recommended people to actually come here, and they are patients now. I really love it here. It feels like family.
Hi, I'm Mark Stewart with Bird Colgin Ford. Join us for our Black Friday sale, where over $16 million in inventory is on sale right now. This month only, get a 24 F-150 for under $500 a month, or a 24 Bronco, only $470 a month. Selection and save all month long at Bird Colgin Ford during our Black Friday sales event. Visit us anytime at bkford.com or come by and experience better at BK Ford.
I'll never get used to this.
If your business is like most, you need things done quickly. But if you're still tying your critical applications together on multiple shared public networks, you've probably been feeling the slowdown. And that's no good for business. A private UPN fiber network can get you and your business moving at the speed of light. Whatever you need, we can build it. Internet, Metro Ethernet, Waves, dark fiber. We deliver custom private networks and are focused on business customers only. Our next generation 100% fiber optic infrastructure offers you low latency and ultra scalable bandwidth with speeds up to 100 gigabit to run your critical applications. Your connection won't be limiting your performance anymore. It's diverse and scalable, so it can grow and change as your business grows and changes. And with a secure carrier-grade private network, you'll have all the reliability you need. Contact UPN today to learn more. Fast just got faster.
This is 365 Sports.
The 3 o'clock hour is sponsored by Waco Custom Marketplace. Meats, sweets, Texas treats, and a cut above the rest. 425 Lake Air Drive, Waco.
Shahan Jararaja, CBS Sports, has been joining us on Tuesdays at this particular time, and there he is. And thank you very much for your time. There's the playoffs being released. There's the Heisman Trophy finalists. There's a lot more when it comes to the carousel and portal. Shahan, any particular argument you have for somebody that was not included among the 12? And then your thoughts about Arizona State making a soaring run to get where they are after beating Iowa State so badly.
Well, this might not be a very popular opinion, but I kind of felt like the committee got it right. I think that these were the right 12 teams. I think it was handled pretty much the right way. There's individual seedings that I could quibble with. I don't really feel like there was a good case for SMU to fall behind Indiana, for example. But I think these are the right 12 teams. When you look at the data that the committee uses, when you look at the metric that they use, when you look at how this system works with obviously the conference championships and the auto buys. So I think overall they got it pretty right. Moving on to Arizona State, I mean, I was one person who felt like, okay, without Jordan Tyson at receiver, they might be in trouble heading into this matchup. But clearly I underestimated just how good Cameron Scadabo was going to be in that game. He was unbelievable, 200 all-purpose yards. And this is a player who, in my opinion, should have been a Heisman finalist when it was announced yesterday. Unfortunately, was not. But I think it's just such an incredible job done by Kenny Dillingham to get them up to speed, going from 3-9 to in year one to now winning the Big 12 after being picked last place in year two. I mean, again, it's one of the most impressive turnarounds I've ever seen year over year in college football, and they deserve every bit of having a first round bye in the college football playoff.
Do you feel that the committee stood up for anything or were painted into a corner? I think sometimes people get credit for fighting the good fight and telling the SEC, look, you got 3 teams, the 3 good teams. Alabama wasn't good enough, but was that necessarily the case, or did they just get painted into that corner?
No, I think that they did make a decision, right? I mean, it was going to be a big story how the losers of conference championship games were going to be handled. And ultimately, when you look at the rankings, very few were too negatively impacted. You see Texas moving from number 3 in the rankings to being the top overall at-large team. You look at Penn State, of course, still finishing ahead of Notre Dame, even though they lost against Oregon in the Big Ten title game. So I think that it was the right way to handle it, and I think they chose to do it just like that as well. And I mean, look, I said it on social media after. I didn't feel like SMU versus Alabama was a very tough decision. I mean, when you head into this ACC title game, there were 2 losses in between these 2 teams. It was a 1-loss team against a 3-loss team. And when you look at the loss that SMU took, it was a 56-yard field goal as time expired against Clemson. I mean, that's just a game that happens, right? I don't think that you want to blow up the entire system over it. And I know that the thing that's been going around is SEC people saying, well, clearly you don't care about strength of schedule. I mean, look at them versus everybody else in the college football playoff and in the rankings. They essentially got a mulligan loss versus every other conference in this league, right? I mean, you have Georgia as a 2-loss team in front of multiple 1-loss teams, finishing as the number 2 overall seed. You have Alabama as a 3-loss team, finishing multiple spots ahead of any other, not just 3-loss team, but multiple 2-loss teams as well in the rankings. So I think that this was the right decision. There was just such a big gap between SMU and Alabama in my mind that I think that they just had to do it.
Shahan, the coaching carousel rolling on along, and the Big 12 saw Scott Frost return to UCF. West Virginia's job still open right now, although they're flirting with Rich Rodriguez. I know Todd Monken's also a name that's being thrown around quite a bit there, but we know it won't be Andy Kotelnicki. Any thoughts on just the hire of Frost and what West Virginia may potentially do, but also getting back with your ex and the risk and reward of doing that for UCF and potentially also for West Virginia?
Yeah, it's an interesting time, isn't it? Obviously, some teams trying to relive the glory days just a little bit. But I do think that when you look at each makes a little bit of sense. I think with the Scott Frost hire, like, it was way out of left field, to say the least. I don't think anybody expected him to come back as a head coach in college football. But I mean, I think that when you look at that Nebraska program, and by the way, the Nebraska program, even since a really good coach and Matt Rule has taken it over, like, there are some things that are really tough about that job right now. And Scott Frost was so young when he left UCF to go take the Nebraska job. I don't mind trying it again, right? Like, I don't mind just seeing what he's got. Now, I think you want to make sure that you have a contract that has some pretty easy outs after 2 years or whatever if things aren't going in the right direction. But I mean, again, they went undefeated. They claimed a national championship in 2017, whatever you want to talk about it. They were in contention for the AAC, in contention for the New Year's Six every single year when he was the coach there. And by the way, he's also a turnaround artist at that school. He took the team from, of course, 0-12 to being undefeated only 2 years later. So this, I think, is an intriguing hire. We'll see if it works. It's obviously a risk that they're taking, but I think it's one worth taking. You know, the Rich Rodriguez one is a little bit more interesting for me if that's the direction that they end up going, because it's been so long since he's been in major college football, right? Obviously, he goes to Michigan. He has a stint at Arizona. It's worth noting, too, he was let go at Arizona, not because he wasn't winning, but because of some sort of off-field issues that he and his staff had. So, I mean, it's certainly an odd one, but I mean, you look at what he's accomplished at Jacksonville State. Outside of Michigan, he's basically won everywhere in his career. So, again, especially if the donors are pushing it and it's a fundraising ploy for them as well, like, I don't necessarily know that there's an obvious other candidate on the board, especially if Andy Kotelnicki turned them down.
The finalists for the Heisman have been released. Of course, that was yesterday evening. The finalists, the favorites appear to be, without a question, Travis Hunter and Ashton Jeanty. I voted, you voted, others have voted. But, Shahan, was there anybody that you thought might be included? Because they can only have so much that goes to New York.
Well, there were two guys who I really felt like deserved a little bit more consideration, and that would be Cam Scadabo, who I mentioned off the top, from Arizona State. I mean, he was number 2 in the country in all-purpose offense. He obviously carried Arizona State in a lot of ways from last place in the Big 12 to, of course, winning the Big 12 championship game and making the college football playoff. I felt like his case was really good. He's the first player since Christian McCaffrey to have 1,500 yards rushing and 500 yards receiving in the same season. So, like, a really, really impressive season. And the other guy who I thought maybe deserved a little bit more consideration was Bryson Daly from Army. He co-led the nation along with Ashton Jeanty with 29 touchdowns for this Army offense. He led the best Army rushing offense since 2017, and they go 11-1 and win the AAC in their first year of being there. Now, look, at the same time, right, like, they have another game that they have yet to play, and I think that probably doesn't help matters. If that game is over before voting is over, maybe there's a little bit better of a case. But I felt like those were two guys who really should have been there, and I would have taken them over some of the other guys who made the finalist list.
What do you think about Bill Belichick potentially being the coach at North Carolina? The way I feel about this story is there's a lot of details out there that make me seem like either they're going to shake up the world or this is the path to, look, we interviewed Bill Belichick, but it's just too much for us to do.
Well, from what it sounds like, I mean, again, John Summerall at Tulane is staying put, and he's going to have his pick of really any job, most likely, in 2025. Again, and I think that there have been other names linked that haven't seemed to necessarily pan out the way that they want. So I think, one, this is a little bit of we aren't getting our top guys right now. But when I look at it, it's just such an interesting and odd fit to me. Not necessarily because I think it's a bad fit, but, you just fired a coach who is 73 years old, and now you're going to bring in a coach who turned 73 in April, to start over. I think that the other piece, too, from the Belichick I'm one of the greatest football minds that's ever lived, which is 100% correct, by the way. But then I'll flip it in a year, and I'll go and take an NFL job. Well, that's not how college jobs work. You have to do 2, 3, 4 years of development cycling with your roster in order to get it really up to speed. A college job is a 3-year job. I don't know if Bill Belichick necessarily realizes that. I think that he thinks he can maybe do this in 1 year. So at the same time, right, I think that if you are Bill Belichick, you are trying to show everybody in the NFL, hey, I am not taking a step back. I am not slowing down. If you're North Carolina, you're trying to say, hey, look, we are a program that hasn't had a lot of attention on us in a while, and we want people to understand we are serious about football. We are credible. And I think that's where the connection comes from. But I'm curious, when this process started, if either side really saw themselves getting pushed into this position.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And he's in a living room trying to recruit a kid. And, the guy's kind of hanging. He goes, are you coming or not, asshole? I mean, that's kind of like that he's not going to – you just wonder how that plays out. He might be much more personable than we think.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And, I mean, again, just the dynamics of interacting with players, I guess, is so different. But one of the things that I feel like people don't think enough about is, imagine installing an offense or a defense with a 17-year-old coming from small-town North Carolina versus somebody who played for Nick Saban and won a national championship who's 29 now. It's a completely different dynamic of just how you have to coach these guys, how you have to manage these guys. Imagine if every single player on the New England Patriots was a free agent after this season and you had to convince them to come back. That's what college programs are dealing with right now. So there are just so many dynamics. And look, maybe he's up for that. Maybe he's excited by that challenge. But I'll tell you what, if I had an NFL background, I don't know that this would be the first move that I'd make right now.
Look, I will disagree with Smokey. I think that Bill Belichick recently has shown a strong ability to talk to college-age people.
Oh, my God.
I mean, he's related.
Well, he can also just walk from the football offices to her dorm room, right?
Well, hey, look, here's the deal. What he talked her into is a lot harder than getting somebody to come play football for you.
Well, I don't know though. I mean, he did have some advantages from an NIL perspective, I imagine, in that interaction, and you don't know how that's going to translate when you gotta find 105.
Absolutely,
that's true. That's true.
From the oldest coach, Mac Brown, to what will be still the oldest coach in college football, if it works out with Bill Belichick. That's also an interesting note about the possibility of him taking over. Shahan, thank you, man. It's a crazy time. We're going to get into the transfer portal a little bit more, which is an everyday deal right now. We're about to hear from Dan Hampton, who's going into the Hall of Fame as Vegas has their big banquet and dinner tonight. Thank you so much for your time. Shahan Jararaja, CBS Sports, with us on 365 Sports. And Dan Hampton, one of those inducted tonight in Vegas by the National Football Foundation, former Arkansas star. He's next. This is 365 Sports. The Baylor Club inside McClain Stadium up I-35 in Waco. No more football games, at least for Baylor at home. We know that. But they do have banquets, dinners, opportunities for you to sit down with a client or you sit down with a business if you want to be a part of their marketing plan. And great food. Chefs that cook absolute delicious cuisine. Memberships available. Don't forget to tell them you're a part of Sikkim 365 Sports with the Baylor Club inside McClain Stadium. We are now joined by former Arkansas great and about to be a part of the National Football Foundation's College Football Hall of Fame, the great Dan Hampton, with us. And Dan, thank you so much for your time. What does this mean to you? Well, you've known about it, but what will this now mean to you when it becomes official?
Well, thank you. You're so kind. I will tell you this morning we had a press conference, and they read off some stats. 18 million people have played college football in the last 137 years or whatever it is. And there's only about 300 in the Hall of Fame. So, I mean, it's a very, very small percentile. And when you look at it in those, terms in that relationship, you go, wow, that was amazing. But I can't tell you this is all, Dan Hampton doing. It was, I played on some fabulous football teams. We beat the number one team in the nation and wound up with the share of the national championship when nobody gave us a chance. We beat Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl when we were 23-point underdogs. So all of those different things and all of is a part of the mosaic that has kind of come full circle. And now, after some 40-something years playing at Arkansas, I'm now going into the College Hall of Fame. It's unbelievable.
It is usually people do it in the other order, Dan. They do the college first and then the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But you are, I mean, you've got the gold jacket. You are part of some of those great teams. But Arkansas back then, I think there's a lot of younger fans who may not realize what a juggernaut and what it was playing for the Frank Broyles teams and everything after that. What do you remember about being a Razorback and calling the Hogs?
I got to tell you, and it was a different time, a different era, but our coaches, they believed in you better be in shape and you better be willing to hit people. And we didn't have the biggest, most talented players on both sides of the ball. But my goodness, let me give you an illustration. The great Earl Campbell. I talked to NFL players that played against him once or twice, and they go, oh, my God, I played against him 3 times in college. And he never got over 100 yards. We just had a bunch of, scrappy dudes that wanted to fly around and hit people. And that was kind of like, our mantra, our calling card. We said, yeah, you may be, a more talented team, but we will out-scrap you. And in the world of football, well, that has a lot to do with the outcome of the game. And I think, in my 4 years at Arkansas, we won the Orange Bowl, we won the Cotton Bowl, and we played in the Fiesta Bowl to a tie. So, in those 4 years, the Razorbacks will never be in those kind of major bowl games again in my lifetime. But, for that moment in time, our teams, they were special.
Dan, the 31-6 win against Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl, Roland Sales, of course, was a huge story along with what you guys did. A lot of it's about how well they ran the ball. You, the Hogs, against Oklahoma, which was known for doing that. But defensively, you actually Sales had over 200 yards. You guys shut down that Oklahoma option and everything else. What was the mentality entering that game, and what was it like when you guys dominated that game?
Well, again, it was Arkansas. Oklahoma had been a perennial, favorite in the world of college football. They were number one. They had won the national championship for years here and there. The Razorbacks, we just were like, hey, what about us? We need and deserve a little bit of credit, and we approached that game with a certain vigor that we knew what we had to do. We had to shut down their mighty wishbone option where they had 3 first-round draft picks at running back, and on offense we needed to move the chains and keep the ball away from them. And it worked out perfectly. And Lou Holtz, one of the great, great, great coaches of all time, he'll always have a special place in my heart. But I'll tell you this, it made him a nationwide celebrity because of that accomplishment, and he deserved it.
And the suspensions, right? What was that like as you being a major part of that team? I don't know if you were a captain that year. I'm sure you were. But when he suspended the players, what was the reaction like at that time, and did that just galvanize everybody?
The latter. You had it right there, perfect word. It galvanized us. And here's the thing. if you know what the rules are and you break them, that's on you.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had a deal where if a player was, arrested and we had a dorm incident, 88% of our offense was suspended by these three players that had accounted for 88%. Well, it did not seem to affect us mentally and obviously as far as the performance. But from top to bottom, the hidden hand of that game was about a guy named Monty Kiffin. And a lot of people know who Monty Kiffin is. Now everybody thinks, oh, that's Lane Kiffin's dad. Monty Kiffin was a brilliant defensive coach, and he completely changed our defensive scheme. And we had a month to get ready for, the New Year's Day bowl game. And we completely changed our defense, and Oklahoma was not ready for it. And before they knew it, baby, we pounced on them. And it was a great night. And to this day, there's a poll, the greatest Razorback teams of all time. And then back in 1963, the great Jimmy Johnson, Barry Switzer, and Larry Lacewell, all these other great players. Still to this day, that 78 Orange Bowl winning team is voted year in and year out the greatest Razorback team, and I'm so proud to have been a part of it.
And that says something because they had that team in the early mid-'60s that won the national title. Dan Hampton being inducted tonight into the College Football Hall of Fame with us on 365 Sports. Paul?
Dan, how would you compare the coaching styles of Mike Ditka to Lou Holtz?
Well, in an abstract way, they're very similar. They were completely demanding, and they stressed meritocracy, which is, hey, you get what you earn. And nobody got a free ride. Nobody was played favorites, and everybody had to work hard. And, some players excelled and had great acclaim and notoriety, but it wasn't by design. It was by the way they played. And I loved playing for Lou. And I will tell you this, my first 3 years in the pros, I played for a head coach, wonderful man, but he wasn't that type of coach. I felt lost. And then when Ditka came in, I shook my head and said, man, this is the guy. And it was 4 years later, we are down in New Orleans winning the Super Bowl. And like people, say, the best plans of mice and men. It was the goal. It was the objective. And Mike Ditka said, this is what's going to happen if we do this, this, this. And both of those coaches, they stressed discipline, tenacity, and, hey, if you wanted to be great, go out there and prove it.
All right, the 85 Bears, everybody knows as destructive of a team, of opponents as anyone could possibly be. Walter Payton, Mike Singletary, we're here in Waco. Dan, of course, he played at Baylor with Grant Taft. You, Richard Dent, Jim Covert, and then Bam Bam, Steve McMichael, finally enshrined into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I got goosebumps bringing that up. What did that mean to you?
Well, as you know, my dear friend, Steve McMichael, legendary player for the Bears, he was stricken with ALS 4 years ago, and it's been an awful story. But the silver lining is the Hall of Fame did what they needed to do, and they elected and inducted him into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And as great as that is, Richard Dent's in the Hall of Fame. 3 out of the 4 defensive linemen on that defense were in the Hall of Fame. But we're not the most famous member of the defensive line. That is William the Refrigerator Perry. I'm out in Vegas for the banquet tonight, and I've had 5 different people. Hey, how's Fridge? How's Fridge? He was, he was a nationwide, novelty and everybody's favorite player because he was just, he was an amazing athlete, and it was such great fun playing with him. But you're exactly right. We had some terrific players. I think we've got 5, 6 guys in the Hall of Fame now. But make no mistake, that team, it was led, and the footing and foundation of it was the great Walter Payton.
Yeah, the great Walter Payton, the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. Dan, the 85 team was so dominant. I'll never forget the game in Dallas, or in, I guess it was Irving against the Cowboys, when you just pummeled them, I think like 44-0. What was it like being on that team? It seemed like everybody had a hell of a lot of fun, but on game day, you guys had fun because you pulverized most everybody.
Oh, and we had fun the other days too. But the thing being, we always had a great deal of focus. We were so goal-oriented and driven. But the Dallas Cowboys just happened to be the 11th game we played that year, and we were 10-0. And I'll never forget flying down to Texas. Somebody showed me an article. Everson Wall said, well, the Bears are 10-0, and they ain't played nobody yet, though. Well, as soon as the game was over, we'd won 44-0. I went to the media, and I said, well, now we're 11-0. We still ain't played nobody. So we didn't make no friends in Dallas. But I got to tell you, Mike Ditka felt bad because he had come out of the Dallas organization. He loved Tom Landry, but we were like wild dogs. We had no favorites and no friends. We got after everybody. And it was, as you said, it was a great time to play the game of football.
You mentioned Walter Payton and how he set the culture of the team, which I think that if you look like historically on teams, if you looked at really what you guys had, because you had Jim McMahon's, we've met him several times. Still to this day, one of the weirdest, wildest, craziest dudes ever. And sometimes like that kind of vibe is not great, but if you have personalities that can balance, and a leader like Walter Payton and a guy who is serious as a heart attack like Mike Singletary, and then what you guys had a nice personality balance on that squad, didn't you?
Certainly did. And, you talk about Mike Singletary. He was such a treasure at middle linebacker. But we also had Dennis Gentry. Mm-hmm. We loved Dennis Gentry. He was our gadget guy on offense, returning punts, returning kicks, third down, all those different. We just had an amazing blend of very talented players. But your point about the personality, not everybody can be, Tom Brady, the leader. You got to have some folks that kind of do their job, and then you got to have the leaders kind of set the pace. And we did that in such a great fashion that year. But you asked about McMahon. Just to give you an idea how nuts he was, they asked Ditka the day before the Super Bowl, there's been death threats on your quarterback. He received death threats. Are you worried about him or his reaction or his mental state of mind going into the game? And Ditka said, no. Hampton and McMichael have threatened to kill him at least 5 times. So it was, we were, that movie came out before our time, but it was the Bad News Bears, and we wanted to be the monsters of the Midway.
Dan, if you don't mind, one more question. I asked about what it will be like tonight when you accept it. And again, for everyone watching, there's the awards and honors tonight in college football. Some of them were handed out last night, but the inductions by so many, and we're going to get a short list here in a minute of a few that are tied in some ways to either the former Big 12 or the current Big 12. When they called you, what was your reaction to tell you that you were going to be inducted?
Well, and I'm not being facetious, but I was shocked. And I'll tell you why. I played at Arkansas 40-something years ago. Mm-hmm. Everybody's either gone, dead, or don't care now. And you have to have a certain bit of vibe out of your college. Every team has had great players. Every team, every college wants to have people in the Hall of Fame. And there's almost like a lobbying effort that, a lot of people really do on a pretty large scale. Well, I never had, but for this to happen, I'll be 67. Well, I am 67. It's been 40-something years. Never thought it would happen. It only makes it more special.
Yeah, and well-deserved, well-earned is what I say as well. Dan, enjoy it. Thanks to Phil Marwell and everyone for helping set up the segment with you. I love your outlook on life. You seem to be very happy, and you also seem to enjoy everything you've been able to be a part of, and also hope you enjoy the heck out of tonight in Las Vegas.
Well, you were asking, thank you so much, but you were asking about the Big 12. Well, before the Big 12, it was the Southwest Conference.
Yep, absolutely.
And I was the Defensive Player of the Year in '78. The next year, it was Steve McMichael in '79, and 1980, it was Mike Singletary, and we were the guys that in the middle of that defense for the next decade in Chicago. So there's your pretty good tie into the guys in the College Hall of Fame and the early days of the Big 12 and the Southwest Conference.
Dan, great stuff. Thank you so much. Enjoy it, and we maybe bring you back on at some point when Arkansas is making a run, hopefully pretty soon in football when they get themselves kind of back together again. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, and all I can say is go Hogs.
There you go. There you go. Pig Suey, Dan Hampton. That Chicago Bears team, it's about what he did at Arkansas. In fact, before we get into that, Garrett, do you have that graphic that I sent to you? Now, these are not Big 12 players, but tonight these are 4 players, a great graphic, who will be inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. It's the National Football Foundation Awards. You have Justin Blackman. He played at Oklahoma State, tremendous receiver in college with Oklahoma State. He played inside of being a part of the Big 12. Deion Figures played back when it was the Big 8 with Colorado, but Colorado now a part of the conference. Dewey Selman, a part of the Selman brothers. Lucius, Dewey, and Leroy, all were phenomenal. He's inducted. He played in the Big 8 at Oklahoma, now a part of the Big, obviously the SEC. And then Alex Smith, the quarterback, what a story about his comeback from the leg injury, the horrific surgery, quarterback at Utah when they were a part of the Mountain West Conference, and now a guy that's an analyst when it comes to football, and he's done a really good job with that.
Good one. Yeah, no, I wonder in Oklahoma, I know this is the way, at least for Leroy in Tampa, but I have a feeling it's probably the same way. If they decided to change the name of the state, if Selman would just or hey, Oklahoma City's a lame name for a city, it's just our name and then city, we'll change it to Selman, Oklahoma. I think that would get some steam. They're beloved there.
Craig's a huge OU fan, and the entire family he's been a part of. But you follow, right? Oklahoma, where the Selman brothers came from.
Yeah, I follow Oklahoma.
Yeah. No, that's the name of the city where he was born.
What do you?
I was just bringing up where he was born in Oklahoma.
Yeah. I don't understand what you're saying.
3 players from a city that I bet may not have 100 people in it.
What's that?
The Selman brothers had ended up going on and having a great run at Oklahoma with Barry Switzer as the head coach, and then also what he did, Leroy, especially with the restaurants and more in the Tampa Bay area. All right, anything else we want to add? That's it. When we come back, we're going to look at the transfer portal. Even today, there was movement. Craig Smoak's off the radar as well.
Yeah, there is one note I wanted to mention, and that is that Mackenzie Milton officially named UCF's quarterbacks coach. So that is now official, and that is a big former name that will definitely get people and has gotten people excited already. One of the greatest players in program history. He's coming back to the program to coach quarterbacks under Frost. So that's a hire that I think a lot of people were anticipating, but it's now official. So I think that's another little batch of electricity you can throw onto the pile that's growing for UCF fans who have had a hard couple of years, but have now, with this hire, started to kind of get rejuvenated a little bit, I feel like. And that's what you're hoping happens with West Virginia as well, with whoever they end up with, whether it's Rich Rodriguez or a Todd Monken or whoever that might be. But definitely winning the press conference and winning these first couple of days on the job is one Scott Frost.
Yeah, we hope that we get him on. We had good access with Gus Malzahn, and hopefully Scott Frost will be available for us at some point. Of course, UCF with a new era, bring it back, repeat with Scott Frost. What a year he had before he took the job at his alma mater, Nebraska.
I'd also like to talk to Mackenzie Milton if we could.
Well, we can do that too.
Yeah.
All right, when we come back, we'll have a look at the transfer portal. Paul's going to look at the offensive side of the ball. Some that have not entered the portal that maybe had that option. A couple of news and notes on that. And this is 365 Sports.
Oh, Richard Carr, Buick GMC, how lovely are your SUVs. Oh, Richard Carr, Buick GMC, I love the trucks you have for me. Strong and tough with luxury, room for all my family. Oh, Richard Carr, Buick GMC, you are the dealer over me.
Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, the team physicians for Baylor Athletics, diagnosing and treating all sports-related injuries, including concussions. These specialists also provide orthopedic services for athletes and non-athletes alike, whether it's knee or shoulder pain, a wrist injury, orthopedic spine care, and even an arthritis and total joint clinic. Trust the doctors Baylor Athletics trust. Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics wants to get you back in the game.
Camille Johnson Realtors guide you seamlessly through the process of buying your dream home or selling your current one. Commercial, farm and ranch, or residential, Camille Johnson Realtors can smoothly and successfully lead you through any transaction. With a team of 28 experienced agents who are excited about serving you, Camille Johnson Realtors services the entire greater Waco area. If you're in the market to buy or sell, contact Camille Johnson Realtors, 104 Midway Center in Woodway, or find them online at www.camillejohnson.com. Camille Johnson Realtors, elegant, charming, warm. Welcome home.
Petty Clinic Men's Healthcare in Woodway is now proud to offer you men an exceptional weight management body sculpting product called semaglutide, also known as Ozempic or Wegovy. Semaglutide is an FDA-approved weight management medication. Once-a-week injections of this powerful medication offers an average body fat weight loss of 20% within the first year of treatment. In addition to body sculpting, semaglutide also normalizes blood sugars and has the clinical research proof of reducing blood pressure, cholesterol, stroke, and heart attack risk. If you're like most men and you have stubborn fat that will just not respond to typical diets and exercise, then help is finally here. Semaglutide, affordable, highly effective. Google search Petty Clinic Waco and reach out to the Petty Clinic team today for a free consultation with Dr. Petty to see if semaglutide is right for you. Go to pettycliniclowt.com.
Parenting is full of surprises.
You never know what to expect.
So after our son was born, I called my Texas Farm Bureau insurance agent to set up a life insurance policy in case something happened to me.
Sawyer is now 2.
And we'll soon have a sister. There's no one else I would trust with protecting my family.
Stop by and see our agents at one of our 3 McClain County locations.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. This segment is brought to you by Michelob Ultra. It's only worth it if you enjoy it. Containing only 95 calories and 2.6 carbs.
365 Sports around the corner, off the radar. Tim Brando today will join us a little after 5. Garrett Ross and Emery Winter inside of our studios today. And running the mothership. Don't forget tonight at 10:30, 365 Sports tonight on the CW locally. And also, if you don't mind, hit that like and subscribe button. If you have subscribed, tell somebody else about us as we grow and grow and grow thanks to you. Paul?
Yes. Okay, let's go to the transfer portal news and notes of the day. And this is maybe names that you should know that are in there. And I'll go position by position. So first up, we've got quarterbacks, latest entry, and a 4-star guy last year. He had 1 win this year. But Luke Kromenhoek from Florida State entered today. Apparently couldn't come to a financial agreement with FSU as they are trying to bring in former Boston College quarterback Thomas Castellanos. That's the latest news there. One of the more surprising ones is Malik Murphy, who went 9-3 and set records at Duke. He's in the portal, and we'll see where he winds up going. That one was really surprising because that looked like a fit there at Duke for Malik Murphy, but obviously not the best college football situation. And we'll talk about these after. Obviously, we know that Connor Wegman has been in the portal from A&M. He was a former 5-star recruit. Miller Moss from USC is in there. Yesterday, we talked about Darian Mensah from Tulane. No word on his visits yet. Jackson Arnold is visiting Auburn. And this comes on the heels of news that Blake Shapen, former Baylor quarterback, said today that he is going to come back for next year. I think they do like the young quarterback to have, too. At Mississippi State. Yeah. He's going to come back for another year at Mississippi State, so I don't know how that affects Jackson Arnold. And then Caden Salter from Liberty on this list of the top quarterbacks that are available. I think Darian Mensah on this list is the one that's probably is coming off the best year, obviously. Connor Wigman is the one that was the highest-ranked recruit. Well, maybe Malik Murphy might have been higher than him. I don't know. But there are some interesting ones on there.
That does not include Jacob Zeno, who's in the portal, and appears as if A&M right now is in the mix for that. Now, whether or not that, whenever that is, because the timing of that. But I think of that list, man, it's so weird how some of these guys have had times to shine, and Miller Moss kind of opened the portal from USC when he jumped in it as soon as that game, that season ended.
Yeah, it's an interesting list of guys. I mean, see how much it fills up beyond these guys, but I mean, not the most star-studded. I mean, there's some familiar names here, but not anybody that I'm just really blown away by. I mean, Caden Salter seems like a real talent, but I think people at Liberty, based on what I saw, were quite ready for him to be out the exit door, just based on the fan reaction that I had seen. And I know, quite simply, just looking at the numbers throughout the year, he had a down year, incredibly down year compared to the year that he had in 2023, where they made the big run and then played Oregon in the bowl game. I don't know what happened. I don't know what all the changes were that led to that, but he's not exactly riding a wave of momentum. I think Jackson Arnold, there's a lot of hope that somebody can peel back the layers of that talent and get his best version out there on the field. I mean, he's flashed a little bit, but certainly he's got to learn how to protect the football, for one, and it can't just rely on taking off and running. But I know there were a lot of problems at Oklahoma, including the offensive line, a lack of receivers, all of that. So maybe somewhere where it's a bit better of a situation, he can blossom. But certainly there's some talent that you hope to peel out of there. Malik Murphy, I mean, he's a good player, but I don't think Duke's like, oh, my God, what do we do now? What do we do? I think he's a solid player. I don't know why he's on his third school now. And then, obviously, Wegman, Moss. I mean, we kind of know the deal with those guys. But, yeah, Mensah's really interesting. I think he'll have a lot of pursuers. And did you say anything about him, or who was it you said about Auburn?
Jackson Arnold.
Jackson Arnold's visiting Auburn.
That would make sense for him. But, yeah, I think Mensah's a really interesting target. The rest of these guys, I mean, they're varying degrees of interesting, but I don't feel like there's anybody out there necessarily that's like a couple of years ago, it just felt like the quarterback batch was a little, like when you had, even last year, Cam Ward. Like Cam Ward blows away like this entire group of guys.
Sure.
There's not a Cam Ward on this list, but there's some good players and some guys who can definitely win you games. And in the case of, Jackson Arnold, maybe a guy who can be really good, and we just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I would say that, like, there's a couple guys on this list, like, that I didn't put on the list, like Devin Dampier, who –
New Mexico?
Yeah, he's in New Mexico. I think that Utah's laying in wait for him and really hoping. But everybody else is guys who maybe hasn't hit their stride. One note I will say, Chandler Morris entered the portal at North Texas. He'll be going to his fourth school, which right now he has visits scheduled with Oklahoma State and with Virginia. So
is that SpaceX?
It was like this morning.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I know people can't hear that, but I just had to ask while the moment was going on of like this rumbling, and it's typically SpaceX, right? That's testing out stuff.
Just a little south of Waco.
It's a little loud today.
Texas.
It's like it felt like a little close to home.
Earlier today, it was long. I felt it, but it didn't. It
knocked
like
pictures off the wall at my house.
Oh,
did it really? Yeah, I'm telling you, man, it's louder today. For those
it,
that don't know, SpaceX is like one of their main facilities is like just down the road. So
like
they
15 miles.
And it's one of you live in certain towns. You're like, oh yeah, that just happens here at like 3 p.m. or whatever. It's like every once in a while there's just this random SpaceX testing, and you can tell because it starts to rumble.
It actually. You feel it. You feel it.
Yeah. So anyways, back to Paul's list here.
Yeah. Let's go to the running backs here. This position is more diamonds in the rough, but these are the 4 names that people will know. But Wayshawn Parker, who is from Wazoo, really, really good year. Fluff Bothwell from South Alabama, which these are all pretty young guys would have a lot of eligibility left. Ahmad Hardy, I think, is the best one of the bunch. He's out of Louisiana Monroe. He's already got a visit set up with Ole Miss. And Quentin Joyner from USC, all in the portal. There are some other guys that you may know, Eli Sanders from New Mexico, but for the most part, the running back list is a lot smaller, but these are 4 guys, and particularly the 2 in the middle. I think Bothwell and Hardy have a good chance to hop up a level and really, maybe find their way into some pretty elite programs.
Bothwell, 832 yards, 13 touches and touchdowns, and also caught 13 passes for 100 yards. So he's a kind of can catch it out of the backfield as well. I had not heard much about him, but South Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hardy's got a visit to Ole Miss already lined up. The guy who's probably the most interest to me personally is not on this list. It's Ishmael Mahdi. I think he's going to be one of the better running backs in this batch of guys, and it might be just a layup that he ends up in Lubbock and follows his OC Mac Leftwich from San Marcos to Texas Tech, but maybe not. We'll see, but very productive guy. Not a glowingly great list of running backs necessarily, but there's some talented players on here. Obviously, you start to get guys lining up visits to bigger schools, like I just mentioned with Hardy and Ole Miss. I guess these are the kind of the cream of the crop right now. So I don't think anything like jumps out at me in terms of this grouping, but there's definitely some guys that schools will be all over.
And Louisiana's where Hardy's from, correct?
Yeah, Monroe.
ULM. Okay, yeah. He had 1,000 yards, I believe, because I remember looking at him when I was looking at a couple of All-American teams, okay?
Yeah. All right, let's go to the wide receivers. This list much longer. This is the position that this is the most transactional position in college football now, where you're just finding places where you can get touches and reps and make your way to the NFL faster. The top one, Eric Singleton Jr. from Georgia Tech. He has visits scheduled all over the place already. Really kind of a surprising entry given how Georgia Tech was on the up, but they're not really a passing team.
Well, it doesn't help when your quarterback's arm doesn't work, basically, Haynes King. Yeah. But, they are more of a running team now, especially,
Yeah, and 2 names that they're not back-to-back on this list, but Dane Key and Barian Brown, both from Kentucky. Their offense really bad, and these 2 guys are very heavily sought after. We talked about Casey Concepcion last week when he went in. He's one of the best wide receivers in the country. Had a bad quarterback situation at NC State. He's visiting A&M along with Micah Hudson. So that would be one or both of those guys would be huge gets. Jonte Cook, of course, a big name recruiting-wise, but didn't do anything at Texas. And then, there's some other names on the list with Stribling, Kendrick Law from Alabama, C.J. Daniels, who was at Liberty and LSU, and some others. Eric Rivers from FIU is one to keep an eye out for. Reggie Virgil's a big guy who's got a bunch of offers, too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really curious to see where Micah Hudson ends up, see who can try to peel that talent out of him. I mean, clearly a guy who was rated as highly as he was for a reason, and, I mean, we've seen him play in person and seen the film. I mean, he jumps out at you. He just didn't do that in his 1 year in Lubbock, and I know there's varying reasons as to why he wasn't good enough. They had a good starting wide receiving core, and they did. I mean, and so I understand the mindset there, and who's to say, not being at practices that he did all he could do. I don't know, but it didn't work out, obviously. But at the same time, that's not going to keep anybody from shying away from him. I think there's a world of potential there, so I'm excited to see where he ends up. Same with Jonte Cook. I mean, I saw
dripping with unbelievable talent.
Saw this guy's the game changer and this and that, and then he went to Texas, and you didn't hear about him other than perhaps getting crossways and it not working out that well. So definitely really interested in him. And then DeJon Stribling, I really liked him at Oklahoma State. Talked about that yesterday a bit. I think he'll be a really nice wide receiver for somebody as well. But, yeah, this is definitely the deeper of the list that we've seen so far on offense, and the most interesting one, I think, as well. I mean, the quarterbacks maybe are more interesting pound for pound, but this, Micah Hudson, Jonte Cook, DeJon Stribling, various others, I think this is Eric Singleton. This is a pretty fun list to see where these guys wind up, and obviously there's a high demand for wide receivers right now, so that ought to be nice for their pockets.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go to the Hog Mollies, the offensive linemen. here. Hunter Zambrano is from Ball State. Ball State has a bunch of guys in the portal. They had their best year in a long time. Their quarterbacks in, wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, one of whom we'll talk about in a second. Ball State has guys that are trying to bounce up a level after a good season there. So he is one of the number one ranked guys in there, according to a couple services. Patrick Kutas from Arkansas. A lot of people think he's on his way to Ole Miss, which I think I saw somebody say Lane Kiffin's been doing this to Arkansas for the last couple of years with basically, what are you going to do about it? When it comes to their players in the portal. Liberty's Jordan White, a really good offensive lineman. He's also in the portal. Braylon Moore, one of several offensive linemen from Virginia Tech that's in there. Josh Thompson of Northwestern, considered by many to be the best overall and most accomplished lineman in the portal, and that goes with for the same for Corey Robinson II from Georgia Tech. All of them there in the portal. And these are guys who are going to cash in well, even on down the list of guys, because people need offensive linemen. They need them bad. If you gave FSU an unlimited budget and told them these guys fit Gus's offense, he would probably sign all of them because they need it so bad. And that's not just the case for them. That's the case for a lot of people.
I don't know much about I've seen Zambrano. Boy, you would think that list would be very much – by the end of maybe a week or two, you would think that list would triple, quadruple, not just the numbers of entering, but those who might be names – that make teams go, oh, really? He's available.
Yeah, and part of this as well, and I read this earlier, is that we've seen a huge wave of people, in so far, but also some of them are also waiting for the last NIL check of the month to clear before they go in. So whenever that comes in, then that's probably in 5 days, right before, shortly before the window closes. So I would think that, once that direct deposit hits in a couple days, you're going to see maybe a wave of guys you didn't suspect before or weren't on the list. And finally, let's go to some of the tight ends here. Just a couple names to keep an eye on. Max Clare from Purdue. Another like Purdue and Ball State. It's been a rough year for Indiana as far as keeping their players. Purdue's got a ton of guys in the portal with the firing of Ryan Walters. Luke Haas from Arkansas in there. The two most intriguing names to me from the G5 coming up are Colin Weber of Charlotte, who had an excellent year, and Tanner Koziel, another Ball State guy, one of the best tight ends in the country this year statistically, and he's going to help somebody out. He's 6'7", 237, a lot of receptions, big red zone target, good run blocker, everything you want to see. So keep an eye on him. And I don't know if you guys have thoughts about tight ends in the transfer portal, but this is my life, and I've done a lot of research on it.
You put it well together. I think we should change the format to Times New Roman. It would be easier to read to me, in my opinion. But good job, Paul. Craig, anything on the tight ends? I love teams that use the tight end. Notre Dame does it. Penn State does it. They got 44. What's his name? He's unbelievable. Is it not Carter? Warren, who's phenomenal. I just Texas with Helm. He wasn't much of a factor in that game against Georgia, but not many people on offense were. I just absolutely love the use of a tight end, although I know in the wide open game that's not used by a lot of people.
I disagree. I think actually tight ends being used more than ever before nowadays. Not the traditional sense like you're pointing to, but like the Michael Triggs of the world. Those guys are as big of a deal. I mean, outside of edge rushers and I don't know what you would put next to that, but I feel like an athletic, talented tight end, much in the vein of, gosh, who was it? Like a Pitts from a few. Like I feel like
from Florida.
Yeah, with Kyle Pitts from 3-4 years ago. Now at this point, like there's been this rise of super athletic receiver type tight ends, and that's become a very important position. I mean, Baylor doesn't win 8 games without Michael Trigg.
Nope.
They maybe get bowl eligible, but they don't win 8 without him. They don't beat TCU without him, and that was their biggest win all year. But, yeah, I think this list is going to grow a lot in the coming days. But it's cool to see. It's cool to look at it. It's, I think, missing a little bit of star power at, quarterback, but there are names that are definitely interesting. They're just a lot of unproven, whereas I think last year I gave, the Cam Ward example. he's about as proven as you could be at a couple of different stops, and so it was a layup him going to Miami that you knew what you were getting. Whereas I think you still don't know quite what you're getting from a lot of these other quarterbacks. It's more of a DJU situation of you recognize the name, but like what are you really getting? So I don't see like the proven guy, but I definitely see a guy like a Jackson Arnold that could be that guy if he falls in the right situation, and maybe that's Auburn with Hugh Freeze, but we'll see because I'm sure there's a lot of negotiating going on right now for a lot of these guys.
It would be interesting to find out how many the hybrid tight end is kind of what you're talking about, and of course guys like Gronkowski and others that have kind of created that. But I love
Kelce.
Kelsey's not bad either. I love a team that goes and throws to the tight end quite a bit. Now, speaking of the transfer portal, Garrett, let's load these up as you want. You want to start with Fran Brown?
Yeah, it's I got the video for Fran.
All right, Syracuse football coach Fran Brown, when asked about the transfer portal, as the Qs, the Orange, the football team in Syracuse gets ready for their bowl game.
We have a really close team, so when there's one of the brothers on the team that's spreading, I'm about to do this, I'm about to do that, and he's doing that in a negative way, to me, you're a snake, and I don't want to be around a snake. So it's kind of dry cut with me, You start being a snake, what do I need to do with a snake? Cut him by the head. Otherwise, he won't die. You can't give him an opportunity. We don't sit down and talk. We don't do things that way. As soon as you say you want to go and you were being sneaky, running around telling everybody, I'm going to make sure that you stand on what you say. That's kind of where we at with that.
God, I love that.
I feel like he's mad about a particular situation.
He might be
I think you're missing context here a little bit. I think wasn't he speaking about like guys going into the portal without talking to the that's kind of important because otherwise it's just like a really angry rant about something.
But this one did feel like maybe he had a particular guy or two in mind.
Dion, by the way, a couple of days ago, he had a press conference when he talked about we don't tap out. We're going to all be ready to play for their game against BYU. But we got to know Fran a little bit when Rule was at Baylor, and I love watching his press conference. He's one of my go-to guys to go watch on YouTube.
Yeah, we just got to provide some context. We saw him cutting heads off and just like randomly angry about things because you just don't know what it's about exactly. But, I don't know who crossed him and got on his bad side, but somebody did, and he's not a guy whose bad side I would want to be on, very much from a rough part of New Jersey, and a guy who definitely was not like your typical Waco guy. It never felt like he really fit in around. He's a New York, New Jersey guy. He's from the streets of Camden, I think, is where he was actually from, or somewhere close to thereabouts, and very much a New Yorker sounding type of dude. So he stood out here for sure, and wasn't around very long because obviously he had other opportunities, ended up with Georgia there for a while, and then after being under the wing of Kirby Smart, eventually ascended to now being a pretty successful head coach in year one. So been happy to see that for him. He always had kind of that endorsement or that sense from Matt Rule that this guy was going to be a big deal sooner rather than later, and he was going to be a head coach one day, and that's panned out, and he's doing well for himself, and I can't really say I'm surprised because you just sort of got that aura about him when he was around here because he did a lot in a short amount of time. So I know there's a lot of players that really respected him and liked him a lot, and he's done really well for himself. So glad to see he's remained pretty no-nonsense at Syracuse, and it's working out really well based on what they've done so far.
Yeah, he was from Camden, New Jersey. Derek Jeter, I believe, was from Camden, New Jersey. Mike Rozier from Camden, New Jersey. Just a couple of names from that great city in Jersey. Now, most scholarship players, this was as of the end of yesterday, in the portal. This is Thomas Hammock, from Northern Illinois. They're the ones that had the huge win against Notre Dame earlier this year. He goes, so yesterday over 1,000 young men went in the portal. Next year's roster sizes will be cut to 105. Let's say the average team is 120. That's over 2,000 less roster spots. The math ain't mathing.
Yeah, guys are going to have to go down levels. They're going to have to go down levels until they find their spot or not play football. So
there's that from Thomas Hammock of NIU.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not just going to be free for all. Everybody gets everything they want. There's going to be ramifications, and I think there were some warning signs of people along the way. We said it at times on this show, hey, there's going to be some challenges that get presented with, like, hey, it's not just going to be like, all right, open the bank vault up and everybody just roll in and grab your money and you get unlimited this and unlimited that. Like, there's going to be some attrition, and so I think you're going to see that with these rosters. I don't know how all that's going to work, and I start seeing numbers and my head gets dizzy anyways.
Yeah.
I can't even begin to compute numbers all that well. It's just not my thing, but I'll trust the math that he did on that one, and if that's the case, then that's an unfortunate side effect, but things are changing. Everything's changing, and I guess that's going to be one of them as well when you have these roster limits and also these schools going forward and paying players directly.
All right, here's a note. The schools with the most players who have entered the portal, and, of course, this could be changed minute by minute, but here is the numbers of the teams. Arkansas, 21. Kentucky, 19. Arizona, 18. Purdue, 18. And Mississippi State, 17. The most from anybody, New Mexico, of course, coaching change, 29. Charlotte, 25. Tulsa, 23. Middle Tennessee State, 22. And Sam Houston State losing their coach. And Sam Houston State with 21. Those are how many players from those schools as of entering today had left their programs to enter the transfer portal. God, that's a bunch.
Yeah, but
get ready because we're less than 48 hours into this bad boy.
No, I know.
If you think that's a lot, you've seen absolutely nothing yet.
Here's what I would also add to it. A lot of people freak out about people leaving in the portal, but if you look at most of the guys, 90% of the guys who leave your team in the portal, they weren't coming back anyway. Like that.
Yeah, I think for example, some of these, I think you're wanting these guys gone.
No.
Yeah. You want these guys out of off your roster to go and fill it up with new guys that are better suited to your roster. I mean, that's as much as the coaches bitch about the transfer portal, it's one of the greatest things also to happen to them because you waste a scholarship on a guy or you choose the wrong player and he doesn't work out for whatever reason. There's really no repercussions for that. I mean, there might be immediately. You didn't, let's say, recruit cornerback well enough. Like, that could come back to bite you if a couple guys don't pan out and a couple guys get hurt, and that might hurt you for a string of games during the course of a season. But it's not as though all those guys are on your roster for the next 2.5 years and you can't do anything about it. So I think for as much of a headache as it is, there's also the benefit of, like, hey, this roster sucks. We need to turn it over.
Yep.
Let's tell some guys, like, hey, you might want to go check out that portal, take a vacation there, and see what comes out on the other side for you. So in that way, it's kind of a good thing.
The portal taketh and it giveth. It just depends on which comes first. Thank you very much, Paul, for the transfer portal segment. We'll look at the defensive side of the ball on the show tomorrow. When we come back, Craig Smoak and Off the Radar, Tim Brando just after 5, John McClain 2, and this is 365 Sports. Marco's Pizza. Pizza lovers get it. Spoke with Bob Mock just recently. He, of course, has 5 locations of Marco's Pizza right here in the Waco area. And there was a time, and I'm not like talking about yesterday or 25 years ago, there were no Marco's Pizzas. Now the fastest growing pizza brand in America. They've got something going on right now called the Pozzoli, pepperoni and chicken, bacon ranch, buffalo chicken, pepperoni and sausage. These are wrapped in some nice bread and has the fillings. It's kind of like not a burrito or a taco or soft taco, but it's only $5.99 each. Use a code word Pozzoli. Triple pepperoni magnifico. I can't wait for the quadruple pepperoni magnifico because it's gone from single to double to more. That's a lot of roni. Limited time for $11.99. The triple pepperoni magnifico. Limited time, $11.99. Use the code word triple prep. The new mega meal deal, $19.99 for a limited time, includes one large topping pizza, cheesy bread, Cinesquares, and that's available too by going online to order. You can go buy and pick it up. They can deliver it to you. Marco's Pizza. Pizza lovers get it.
Established in 2007 and independently owned, Alliance Bank Central Texas is committed to helping families and businesses meet their financial goals. From their tellers to their board of directors, they know the importance of superior service and competitive products. Customers have confidence knowing that their financial needs are in good hands. It's your bank, Alliance Bank Central Texas, with 2 Waco locations, 4721 Bosque Boulevard and 191 Archway Drive on Highway 84, and at alliancebanktexas.com. Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
Riverbend Liquor and Wine now has 2 locations to serve you. The original on Lakeshore Drive at North 19th Street and the brand new spot in downtown Waco at 600 Franklin Avenue. If you're looking for the best in craft beers or local Texas bourbons, then the original is the place to be. And for the latest trends and online phenomenons, head downtown to the Franklin location. Either way, you're going to get the same great variety, customer service, and speedy experience. Check out both locations on their Facebook and Instagram pages, Riverbend Liquor and Wine, Lakeshore Drive at North 19th Street, and now downtown on Franklin Avenue.
This is Craig Smoak's Off the Radar, presented by Alliance Bank. They take pride in making banking easy. AllianceBankTexas.com.
Welcome in Off the Radar here on 365 Sports, taking a look at a grab bag of stories from around the world of, you guessed it, sports. Waiting on Smokey to get back because there's a story that I want everybody to chime in on, and that's where we'll start off, as we are going to dabble a little bit in an MLB headline and an NFL headline as well, but I want to start off in college basketball because a headline we did not get to at the top of the show, but one of the biggest sports headlines in America today actually involves college basketball, and more specifically, it involves BYU basketball, as today the Cougars and their revamped coaching staff, led by former NBA assistant Kevin Young, landed the top basketball recruit in America for the class of 2025 as A.J. DeBonsa committed to BYU during ESPN's First Take earlier today, telling the host that a lot stood out on his visit, including the big pull of the young, fiery, very talented, and NBA experienced head coach in Kevin Young. Said his ultimate goal is to get to the NBA. Said that Kevin Young coached his favorite player ever, who is Kevin Durant. So that was another connection there as well, and had a lot of praise. And so he said that the visit went really well from Kevin Young on down to the analytics department. And he said, if it's all NBA, I'm trying to get to the NBA. I think it's going to be the best developmental program for me. And Kevin Young has supplied BYU basketball with basically an NBA front office in so many ways, or a version of it in college basketball. And that makes a lot of sense because that's the way a lot of it's going. And also, that's what guys want to do, is go to the NBA. And this guy, A.J. DeBonsa, is a bona fide #1 overall draft pick. Not he's a lottery guy. It's like, no, he's, to hear some analysts tell it, if he were to go into the draft this year, would be the #1 overall pick.
Well, there was a time, the Kevin Garnett, Kobe Bryant times, where he could have and would. I mean, it would have been. So the rules are different now. They have to wait until they're 19 years old, which he won't be. They have to be like a full year removed from high school or whatever. So that's why you see guys go right to the G League or whatever. And you know, that's kind of changed a little bit because of NIL.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is huge for BYU, and they're going to have a superstar player next year.
Yeah, you know, someone like that. We've seen programs, some of them, of course, in the Big 12 that have landed the dude, right? But this was awesome for BYU to get this. He did I think the announcement, or did an interview live on ESPN, and they were saying we thought it would be North Carolina or UConn or whoever. And when he popped out BYU, I thought that was great for BYU, and also it's great that the Big 12 has him coming to the conference soon.
Yeah, he did that on First Take, as I mentioned, on ESPN, where he made his decision. That's where that all took place this morning, and so that was a big reaction from those guys and from all of America. So A.J. DeBonsa, #1 basketball player in the country. He's 17 still. He'll be 18 in January. And do you know who he's ranked ahead of in the overall rankings for his class? Cameron Boozer, Duke commit. and son of Carlos Boozer. Also, Darren Peterson, who's committed to Kansas, one of the other highest-ranked commits in that class, but DeBonsa is number 1, so the NBA tie-ins there with new head coach Kevin Young, who's already setting records. This is the highest-rated commit. Before that had the previous rated commit, like the highest-rated international commit, highest-rated homeborn commit. Like all these just records, point being, are falling as far as the best recruits that BYU basketball's ever pulled, and they're falling quickly, and they're going to continue to fall, although you can't get better than the number 1 overall player in the class, but you can have more of those guys. But there was a tie-in here. He does play for Utah Prep Academy, so this wasn't like some random New York City kid that you also landed. There was some background there as far as being close to home. He also had Alabama, North Carolina, and Kansas amongst his top schools, and it's pretty widely known he's going to be the number 1 overall pick in the 2026 draft. He is a one-and-done guy, but BYU will be just fine with that if he comes in and plays really well for a year and brings some excitement, which he's undoubtedly going to do. He would be the first NBA draft pick since Jimmer Fredette went number 10 overall in 2011. So A.J. DeBonsa headed to BYU. Now, the interesting thing about this is what this spurred in terms of the conversation about, well, how did you land him? Well, he mentions Kevin Young and the NBA ties and the basically NBA front office that Kevin Young's building all the way down to analytics in Provo was appealing to him. The fact that Kevin Young coached his favorite player of all time and Kevin Durant's very appealing to him. But let's be real about it as well. There's also some money involved, right? It's the NIL era. If he wasn't going to get it from BYU, he was going to get it from Kansas, or he was going to get it from Alabama, or he's going to get it from North Carolina. So I bring up the money because the money rumors started going wild, and one of the rumors that really caught a lot of heat was that he received $7 to $9 million to sign with BYU.
For what will be a year.
For what is going to only be a year. The rumors that were out there, and look, it's social media, so I know. But $7 to $9 million, and there's a lot of butthurt other basketball fans who probably want to like jack up the price a little bit, like, oh, they overpaid and make themselves feel better. That's a specific brand of copium that you can deal with. But what I found really funny was that while that's a very exorbitant amount of money, I did catch an interview with KSL Live, and they were talking to Kristen Peak, who covers the NBA, and had some insight on this. On this pickup, and she's from Provo, and I think she was maybe even a BYU person. I didn't get to check all of her background, but I did get to hear the interview, and she not only said that DeBonsa would be the number 1 pick next year, but he would have been the number 1 pick this year if that was allowed. She was also asked about the $7 million figure that was thrown out there, and she said that's simply not true.
Yeah.
But that $3 to $4 million sounds like it's probably about in the neighborhood, so... You know, settle where you want to, but $3 to $4 million sounds like it's the low end for A.J. DeBonsa, which we know a little bit about certain players that have been thrown money here in the last few years, even around here. And that's not out of the realm of possibility, especially for a first-round overall number 1 type of pick. So a massive day for BYU basketball and landing A.J. DeBonsa. And I'm just excited to see Kevin Young continue to build this program and see where he can take this thing. But he's got the excitement factor dialed all the way up to 10 right now. That's for sure.
Minimum salary for an NBA player is $1.157 million.
He's making more than that for sure. For sure.
Yeah. Well, and look, here's the thing. People are getting mad because he's not playing for your team, but if he's playing for your team, you would say give him $10 million. And the only reason BYU fans should get mad about this at all is if he's just bad. You know, like if he just turns out to be bad, which I don't think he's going to be. So on the small chance that he's not good, then you can be mad about it. Everyone else, you just have to take your lumps and move on to the next one. And this comes from a lifelong Red Sox fan who's watched many people sign with other team, with the rival, and you just go, all right, well,
what the Yankees just saw with Soto.
Yeah, I mean, again,
they gave him anything they wanted.
He picked somewhere else. Let him move on.
Yep.
Well, speaking of Juan Soto, I wanted to mention that as well since we didn't get to it when it happened. But Juan Soto going to be a New York Met, and a year after his stint with the Yankees, sticking in the city of New York, but you knew this big free agency battle was brewing, and you knew that the Yankees would obviously want to keep him and that the Mets would also be involved. And what are the usual suspects? The Dodgers and the Cubbies and whoever else you wanted to throw into that mix. But Dodgers, Yankees, Mets, that's pretty much your triumvirate of teams that are going to go after these big fish. And amongst the only that can afford these guys at this point, although I know Philly will stick its neck out there and get a Bryce Harper, and so on and so forth. But this one always looked like it was going to be a New York or L.A. deal, and it was the Mets for the 26-year-old Dominican Republic star signing a $765 million 15-year contract that includes a signing bonus of $75 million. That's the signing bonus. $75 million. So 15 for 765, $75 million signing bonus. And if you include all the potential bells and whistles that could add more money here and there, he could get to more than $800 million with this contract should he hit all of the high water marks there. So by far, biggest baseball contract, biggest American sports contract. And I remember having this conversation about like Patrick Mahomes and what his future numbers were going to look like, although the NFL lags behind Major League Baseball in this regard. But I remember saying at the time, because we were comparing it to other professional contracts and even international contracts, and I remember saying, like, we're going to see in the next 10 years a billion-dollar player.
Yeah.
And this guarantees that we're going to see a billion-dollar player in probably the next decade with the Juan Soto contract. So I remember my reaction to A-Rod landing in Arlington and becoming a Texas Ranger for $252 million over 10 years. That is chump change compared to what Juan Soto just signed.
You know what? By the time his contract ends, which is how many years? 15. A little bit prior to that, Bobby Bonilla's contract with the Mets will run out in 2035. Who's the one that gets paid just because he's breathing, which is good for Juan Soto.
None of this is deferred. So 2039.
Everybody's reaction is like, oh, well, I'm sure there's a ton of deferred money. It's like, no, not any of it. None of it. He's getting it all. Like, I mean, he's getting all this money, like the way it's set up. It's not like, oh, well, in 10 years you get this massive chunk of money if you're still around. No, it's not deferred at all.
No, it's a good deal for him. It's what it is. Ohtani got a bunch, and now he gets a bunch, and there's somebody else will get a bunch. It never ends.
I think Juan Soto's a fantastic player. He's one of the best hitters in baseball. I didn't know this is the market, but the Dodger, like the Ohtani deal, looks better and better because you're getting a pitcher with him too. You're getting two. Yeah, essentially his contract made more sense to me because you're signing two players.
How much did they pay him because they also knew they were taking him from the Yankees?
I'm sure Steve Cohen threw that in there a lot. And also, I love the rumors around this thing, and it's been out there, but he was allegedly mad at the Yankees because there was a security guard who wouldn't let some of his people in to a game, and the Mets really kind of played that up. Like, listen, you can bring anybody you want. We don't care. But it was like his personal chef or something, and then his aunt or something that the guy was kind of giving him a hard time about not having passes, and then I guess didn't recognize Juan Soto when he went to go deal with it, and so it kind of got a bee under his bonnet. And they're like, "Listen, you can have the run of Citi Field. You can run Citibank. We don't care. Just please come here."
Steve Cohen of the Mets. According to various reports out there, he had Soto come to his mansion in Beverly Hills. He gave him Latin food. They watched a movie that, I guess, laid out, or I guess it was a film was the proper word, that kind of laid out the presentation and just really wined and dined him. But yeah, nobody really pays as much attention to kind of the courtship as they pay attention to the funnier story, which is that some rando security guard pissed him off, and so he's signing with the crosstown team to spite them, or because that is just what pushed the Mets over the edge in terms of his signing. That is definitely a funnier story, unless you're that security guard who I'm sure has already been identified and is probably not feeling that great about I guess whatever it was that he did. But, man, that's a lot of money. That's a hell of a lot of money, and it's just now a race to who's going to be the first billion-dollar athlete. But Juan Soto has taken the lead and very quickly passed up some other big-time deals that we've seen here in recent history. So there is that, and then a final note for you is we'll just move along. But DeMarvion Overshown of the Dallas Cowboys is out for the remainder of the year after messing his knee up pretty badly last night, tore his ACL, his MCL, and his PCL. in his right knee. He'll have surgery this week and will need a good amount of recovery time, as you might imagine, tearing all 3 of those ligaments. And that happened in their loss to the Bengals, which was, a
Typical
game that was
bizarre.
winnable
Yeah.
until a guy who just got signed and who I felt absolutely awful for, that just was signed to the main roster, has his big moment in the NFL and decides to touch a punt that he shouldn't have touched. And the next thing you know, it turns into a turnover. Bengals get the ball back. They get to score and get to win the game and give Jerry Jones and the home crowd just more of a screw 2024 feeling than they already have, which is a pretty heavy feeling already because of the way this season has gone. But, man, that was ugly last night. But the DeMarvion Overshown injury is by far the ugliest part of the news coming out of last night.
Leon Letts will always be more famous because that was a Super Bowl Cowboys team.
Well, this team is not that. But
this is not.
And McCarthy also said, I should add, that there's a good chance Overshown's not just – I mean, he's obviously out this year, but he could be out all of next year.
I would,
well, 12 months, although it doesn't do always like that, you're talking about December of next year, maybe.
But that injury is they call it kind of the unhappy triad or trinity or whatever, the unholy trinity is what they call it, because it just takes so long to heal and get back. The good news is they said he doesn't have nerve damage like Jalen Smith had, but it's the same injury, so that gives him a better shot. But this guy was a budding star. He was really one of the bright spots for a team that did not have many. He was one of the bulbs that you could still read in the sign. Yep. And, yeah, I hate it. I hate it for him. Also, you want to know what's different about this Cowboys and the 90s Cowboys? The practice squad guy that messed that play up would not, he would have been cut
last night.
Oh, last night.
Yeah. Here's
what did you do when he touched that football?
I freaked out because I knew it was beyond the line of scrimmage. That's the first thing I looked at. And one of the videos, Babe Laufenberg was showing this. I think it was on his Twitter feed, that he was running down as among one of the guys as a gunner, and he had his back turned to it. Now, everyone may not have known it was not even a called block punt, or was. And I don't know if he heard the thud or not, but you wondered if everyone was like, you start yelling, Peter, Peter. That means get away from the ball. So when he turns around, if you watch the video, the ball's kind of bouncing. It took a little bit of a weird hop. He thought it might have been a fumble.
Yeah.
I hate it for him. I absolutely. By the way, the DeMarvion Overshown, that's the second Texas player in a couple of days where we've heard about the knee.
Yeah,
Jonathan Brooks, the other one, the great running back that had a knee injury that ruined his last year at Texas, too. All right, good?
Yeah, there's a few things off the radar. And, Amani Oruwariye is, and I'm sure I'm butchering the last name.
How do you say his name, Paul?
I try to get last names right. Y'all know that I actually try to be respectful and get pronunciations right, but I should have looked at one. But when we started talking about him in particular, I couldn't remember his name. But the players did. I thought it was cool. They were like, they didn't let the media talk to him. Because the media wanted to.
There was a player, one of the guys on defense that protected him.
Yeah, and I think that's cool because, that guy, that poor dude, I know he made a mistake, but, man, can you imagine, hey, Mom, Dad, or, whatever, you get the call, you're going to go suit up in an NFL game, you're on Monday Night Football, and this big crucial moment, the one thing that you do that is notable is the big fumble, and so I'm glad that his teammate had his back, but, yeah, that's an awful feeling, I'm sure, and so hopefully he's able to bounce back from that, and so is DeMarvion Overshown.
Troy Aikman was saying that when finally somebody, I guess, brought it up, it might have been Buck, but he brought it up. He goes, I was hoping nobody would bring up Leon Lett, which was the snow game against the Dolphins when he slid into a block field goal that got by the line, had gotten past the line of scrimmage. They went on to win the Super Bowl, but that was a very critical loss at the time. Hate it for him.
Yankees just signed an 8-year, $218 million contract with the best pitcher left on the market. Former Atlanta Braves lefty Max Fried is now a New York Yankee.
Is that why you slammed your fist on the table?
Yes, I wanted the Red Sox to get him so bad. We need a left-handed starter.
They're not the only team that didn't get him.
I know, but it's just the moment.
Stop trolling him all the time. Just let him vent.
Let me have my emotions, man.
You've had them. You've had them since the college football playoff a year ago.
Yes, it's been a rough year for me. I feel like every day I'm getting kicked in the mouth.
Yeah.
Well, it could be lower.
And every time I stand up, somebody hits me with a brick and goes, "No, get back down."
Yep, I
and
know.
That contract, by the way, sounds like absolute nothingness. I mean, that's more money than I'll ever see in 10 lifetimes.
Oh,
but,
$200 million.
But when I'm talking about Juan Soto, I'm like, whatever, dude. $200 million.
I just can't believe Amanda does that to you whenever you get up. And then, okay, now when we come back, thank you, Craig. Off the radar. When we come back, Tim Brando, Fox Sports. Time to hear his thoughts about the college football standings, the Heisman, and more. And this is 365 Sports. Pioneer Steel and Pipe opened their doors in 1943, new building that they've now been in exactly a couple of different years, Loop 340 and what is Highway 6 in Waco. It's a combination, same two names, on the east side of I-35, pipe, steel, and metal. You build something, pipe, steel, and metal. And you can't really build much without pipe, steel, and metal. And then all of the other products you need when it comes to building some things, like whether it's a house, a commercial, real estate, or even maybe a barn dominium, a metal building, whatever it might be. You even have there things that you need when it comes to building the entrance into a nice ranch or something around a farm. All of the fencing and more, they do that. It's unbelievable family and an unbelievable business that's been in business since 1943. Bigger, better, faster, stronger, pioneerboys.com.
The Wrap Up the Year sales event at Allen Samuels in Waco has huge savings. Get a 2024 Wagoneer or Grand Wagoneer Series 3 and get a whopping dealer discount of $15,000 plus 3.9% financing for 72 months. That's right, 3.9% for 72 months and dealer discount of $15,000. Or drive off in a 2024 Jeep Grand Cherokee Overland or Limited 4XE and save $15,000. Plus, see if you qualify for a $7,500 federal tax deduction. Hurry, only at Allen Samuels in Waco. First responders get an extra $500.
Come by. Let's be friends.
Automatic Chef is your local vending, office coffee, and micro market provider, delivering outstanding service to break rooms all over Central Texas for over 50 years. Automatic Chef brings the best products to your location at the best prices. With hundreds of choices in fresh food, coffee, snacks, and drinks, let Automatic Chef tailor a break room solution to your needs. Make break time great again with Automatic Chef. Automatic Chef Canteen, 6900 Imperial Drive in Waco, or online at automaticchef.com.
Don Humidor, your home with a 48-foot walk-in humidor with the elite cigar brands from around the world, including the #1 cigar of the year, Aging Room Cuatro Nicaragua. Plus, they have the great brands like Macanudo and Artur Fuente, Rocky Patel, Aston, and so much more. CBD, great for sore muscles, aches and pains, sleep, Vita Dreams, and anxiety, mild depression, general health and wellness. Their staff very knowledgeable on the subject. Don Humidor in the Townwest Shopping Center off Valley Mills in Waco.
Want to send a message to the show? Jump in the Rudy's Country Store and Barbecue chat room.
Tim Brando, Fox Sports. It has been a while, and he, of course, with his games, college football, and now already knee-deep into what's happening with college basketball, joins us. Craig Smoak, Paul Catalina, David Smoak on 365 Sports. It's great to have you on, Timmy B. I know you've had a busy afternoon. Let's start. We got 2 or 3 ways to go here, but let's start with the college football, the 12 teams, and what was your reaction? And, hey, Alabama did not win this time.
Yeah, I was stunned, shocked, happily shocked that for the first time in a long, long while, their brand was not enough. A little bit amazed, being honest with you, at some of the pundits and the way they've reacted to it, including some that our colleagues of mine at Fox, Joel Klatt, is one that had a surprising take from my point of view. I certainly agreed with him about the seeding. The seeding is messed up, but we knew that. For me, that's old news. We knew that was going to be the case, that they should have thought about this. They should have really consulted with basketball people who have been doing this for years and years, that you don't necessarily have to, as long as teams are in, that's what matters. And getting a place for conference champions having a place reserved for them among the 12 is fine, but you can still seed them accordingly. Okay, you don't have to just guarantee them a bye, which was what they did, and that's got the seedings messed up. But SMU absolutely deserves to be there, and in my opinion, is a better football team than Alabama right now. So on both fronts, I like SMU as a choice. But Joel, and like so many others that are former players, guys that lined up and actually played it, and that would be their retort to me. Joel and I've had this debate mano a mano for a number of years. And he would be like, I absolutely disagree with you. I'd be talking about Boise State, or I could be talking about something. I absolutely disagree with you. I said, well, okay, you can disagree with me, but I'm here to tell you, and especially in today's game, college football, that's what makes it different. Okay, it's not like the pro game, and to approach it as though, well, if Vegas is going to have said team a 8-point favorite, they deserve to be in over the other. Sorry, that I don't agree with that. Now it's gotten a little more convoluted to some extent, fellas, because we've got so many networks that are involved in the gaming industry. So I think that mine included. So I think it's convoluted it even more, that people want to use Vegas odds or offshore odds, whatever, and say this team or that team is better, or they should be ranked higher than the other based on anything other than the way they perform on the field. To me, it's how you perform on the field. Okay? What I see is all that matters in my poll. And that fluctuates from week to week, as you guys know. But as far as this committee and the decision that they made to stay with SMU, it provided, I think, some sanity to the notion that these guys at least watched. You know, they didn't turn the television off at halftime and go up to their rooms and enjoy their room service. They stayed, watched the game, and then met afterwards and determined what they had to do. I'm not going to suggest to you that the fact that SMU had made the conference championship and that their performance in that game was good enough, particularly in the second half, that if they hadn't made it, that those people in that room would have been concerned about the future of conference championship games, because they would have been. Did that figure into their decision-making process? Probably. And I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all. Getting to your conference championship and competing in it should have some weight. And SMU had played in their first season in a brand new conference and had won every game until that one. And they lost on a field which, by the way, Clemson is very comfortable playing on. They played in many an ACC title game in Charlotte before. They had a home crowd advantage because it's only 2 hours away. And SMU had never been in that environment. And I thought that Rhett Lashley's team reacted very well to, being down but not out and coming back and making a great game of it. So I'm very pleased with what we see. As far as the games themselves and the matchups, I love them too. Even with the bad seedings, and Oregon did get screwed. That's the one thing that I totally agree with Joel on, but I think all of us knew that was going to happen. Did Oregon, does Oregon have a tougher road than Penn State, the team they beat? Yeah, they do. No doubt about it. But I think Oregon is up to that. And in the end, if they win it all, they can say that they absolutely earned it. And they were the best team all year long. And I'm happy to report that was the team I picked to win it all at the beginning of the season.
Tim, how long do you think this model of using the bowl games is sustainable from a fan perspective before they have to – and the other thing of, when Oregon sees what is going on in Columbus in a couple weeks, they're going to go, well, we want that, and we beat them. Like, why can't we have that on our campus before more teams get home games and they, old Yeller, the old bowl system?
I'm not sure that the bowl system is ever going to be completely gone just because of the history and the political aspect of that history and the circumstances around where the games are played and the dome stadiums involved and the voting that would be taking place as it relates to warm weather schools versus cold weather schools. when you get that deep into it. And whether that's fair or not fair, I don't know. As far as the system goes, they should get rid of the seeding issues with the conference championships immediately. That can be rectified right now. Okay? If you win your conference championship, are you in? Yes, you're in. Just like Clemson got in. They stole a bid, no doubt about it. And the reason the fact that they stole that bid meant Alabama got knocked out as an at-large. That happened. That's part of it. That's why it's a playoff. But I think that we're going to go to 16, not 14. I think we're going to go to 16 right away. Right away. Because who's bitching and moaning the most right now? 3 3-loss teams in the SEC and Miami. And Miami's case is probably as good or better than any of the 3 from the SEC, because SMU, their storyline and their resume fits pretty good with Miami's. The only difference being they didn't lose a conference game and Miami did. Miami, in my mind, with Cam Ward, had a reason to believe that they did belong. But when stacked up with Alabama the week before, they could not they couldn't crash the party. They couldn't get past Alabama. SMU did because of the recency. They were the most recent game that the committee was watching that had a indelible impact on their decision-making process overnight. If Miami had had that luxury, they probably would have gotten in too. But I do think we're going to go to 16, and that will be because the Big Ten and the SEC, especially Sankey and well, you saw what Greg Byrne had to say. I mean, look, I've known Greg a long time, all right? Like the man. I knew his dad, as you guys know, very, very well. Bill Byrne's one of the finest people I ever met in intercollegiate athletics. But when he came out with that diatribe about, well, we're going to have to take a look at this really difficult non-conference schedule, I'm like, well, who do you think you're kidding? I mean, do you think most of the media doesn't keep up that we didn't know that the toughest game you played was Wisconsin, and Wisconsin was, trying to be a 6-16? You know, you didn't get there because you got your ass kicked by Oklahoma, a bad Oklahoma team, in prime time on ABC on what is now the number one window in college football, overtaking Big Noon this past year. When you have, I'm sorry, Tiger Woods, if you're winning every tournament, we're going to see every shot. And if you lay an egg, we're going to see every shot. Alabama was awful in that game. And Oklahoma was not a very good team, period. End of story. So, spare me your crying towel, Greg Byrne, okay? And that would be true for any other athletic director. And I like Greg a lot. I mean, he's a good friend of mine. But that's just, stop. Just stop. If anything, Greg Sankey should be, if he wanted to be sarcastic, he could come back now and just say, rather than going to 9 games, which we told you we were going to do and then we didn't, we're going to peel this baby back and only play 6 games like we did back in the 80s, because that way we'll have we won't have the problem that we had this year with 3 3-loss teams that didn't get into the playoffs. You want to have some sarcasm, throw that at me. Don't talk to me about your difficult non-conference schedule, Alabama. Are you out of your mind? The only people that buy that are the daytime gabbers that are pro people or LeBron James watchers, and all they give a damn about college football is that they got to talk about it in one segment, and then they're going to start throwing up Alabama's 3-1 record against top 25 teams. It's as disgusting as hearing Nick Saban talking about them being 3-1 against the top 25. Well, guess what? Those teams that SMU beat that weren't in the top 25, like Duke, like Louisville, they had 3 losses, but you know what? They weren't ranked. The metrics were always on your side. Enough. In this day and time with the portal and the NIL, 26 through 40 could be 15 through 25 in a given week. So just shut the hell up.
Yeah, I felt like the complaining kind of reached a new peak this time around, and I guess with the new playoff, that's to be expected somewhat. But it just felt like it crossed over into just full blown temper tantrum and whining like a toddler over things. But you go out and win more games, and hey, you're in the playoff. It's pretty simple. Tim, You talk about like the disrespect and kind of like nationally, people, I think it's pretty clear there's only certain brands that people really enjoy talking about. I think that was pretty evident on College Game Day last month when Arizona State gets brought up and Desmond Howard's like, why are we talking about this game on live television? But we talk a lot about Arizona State on this show covering the Big 12, and I know you've covered Arizona State. You broadcast their games here, and you've seen Cam Scatterbo in person. What did you think of the Sun Devils and this remarkable turnaround under Kenny Dillingham? And is Cam Scatterbo being maybe a little bit disrespected by not getting more love than he got this season?
Well, they were late to the party, let's face it.
Yeah.
The team had such a tough start. And then when they got hot, by the time they did get that hot, for instance, Scatterbo's playing the same position as Ashton Genty, who was sucking up all the, the oxygen when it came to, great running backs. And kind of understandably so. Out in the Mountain Time Zone, he was sort of eating it all up. But all of us that saw Scatterbo play, even, last year when they had to, they were playing their fourth string quarterback against USC in a game I had about week 4 of the season last year, Scatterbo was still playing like an MVP back then, just as he was this year. Arizona State got him a quarterback now. That's the key. That's what helped them with that acquisition more than anything else, because they had a passing game to help create avenues to run for Scatterbo, and they can absolutely run block and gouge defenses. That's a good, albeit a 3-man front. That's still a very good 3-man front with good linebackers that John Haycock has at Iowa State, and they were treated like rag dolls in that game. I was amazed at how Iowa State was out-physicaled in that game in totality. Did I think Arizona State could win that game? Absolutely, I did. But did I think they'd blow them out to that degree? No. Now, the turnovers certainly helped, and Iowa State had plenty of those. And a team that's usually pretty good about protecting the ball didn't, and once it snowballs, and it did on them late in the second quarter and early in the third, it was over. But I think Arizona State in this playoff, fellas, listen, they might not just win one game. They could win the whole. I mean, they could win the whole thing. I think this team is really hot right now. I wouldn't want to play Boise State. I wouldn't want to play Arizona State. And I damn sure, you mark this one down right now, okay? The Indiana State Championship is going to be won by Indiana at Notre Dame Stadium. Indiana's winning that football game. So I see upsets aplenty in this college football playoff. I do. And Dillingham is sort of like Dan Lanning light. He's the same guy, really. A guy you really want to play for. Guys will run through a brick wall for him. And he's like a kid in a candy store too. He's as energized as the players, but he's brought a discipline to the way they play that is something incredibly special. So, again, going back to the people that we so-called trust that are talking about the college game on a regular basis in the biggest platforms available, they show their bias with how little they cover certain teams all season long. And it's shameful that we have that many hours of college football coverage on a Saturday and certain teams just don't get covered at all. And Arizona State was one of those teams.
Tim, on Kenny Dillingham, this is a dude, Lincoln Riley, was the QB whisperer for a while there. I think, people need to start looking at Kenny Dillingham's resume, which now includes Jordan Travis, Bo Nix, and Sam Levitt.
Yeah, absolutely. He absolutely saved Bo Nix's career, who was spiraling. That was a bad situation he was leaving at Auburn. I mean, he came in with an ego that was bruised, battered, and beleaguered. And Dillingham got that thing started, so much so that when Shine, who took over for Dillingham, who I think is also one of the best offensive minds and one of the best assistant coaches in the game today, who had been at Louisville and was a former Louisville quarterback, Dillingham served him up a Bo Nix that was primed and ready to become a pro immediately. That was basically a pro quarterback that they had a year ago in Nix. And you see what's happened with Dylan Gabriel, how they've continued to roll. And the Levitt pickup was as valuable to that team as any pickup could possibly have been. And again, it's one of those aspects of the college game that so many people just don't understand. They're going to be shocked when these playoffs begin, and some people that haven't been paying much attention to college football, and by the way, some of those are the very people that talk about college football on a regular basis. They're going to be amazed when they see guys like Rourke, okay, at Indiana, guys like Levitt, and so many others. The kid now that at Boise State that had been a bit of a liability, Madsen is now a guy that can also, if you put 8 or 9 in the box to stop Ashton Jeanty, he's going to get it out to those receivers, and he's got 2 or 3 really good ones. You know, Boise State's not just one-trick pony. They're not just Jeanty. Now, they run their offense through Jeanty, but they can beat you in the air as well. And lately, they've been forced to beat people that way because, you know, Jeanty might get his 180 or his 200 yards, but he's having to carry it 30 times to do it. At some point, they're going to have 3rd or 4th and long, and in order to keep the ball, they've got to convert in the passing game, and they've been able to do it of late. That kid's really sharpening his game as a quarterback and as a leader.
Tim, you get to go to these games and around the country. You have seen some of the names of the players who will be in New York with Travis Hunter and Ashton Jeanty,
Yep.
obviously Cam Ward and Dylan Gabriel. They're not going to bring 8 or 9, and Scattaboo made a run, and a couple of others could be included too. But your thoughts
Right.
about where you see this going? I know you have a vote. I can't mention anything until after it's released on Saturday night. But what are your thoughts about the foursome in New York City?
Well, everybody had it wrapped up, right? Speaking of the gab fest, the talk shows, whether it's daily or on the weekends, with both Big Noon and with Game Day, it was wrapped up. It's Travis Hunter's. It's all over. I never felt that way. I never felt that way. I really believe that Jeanty was a strong candidate all the way through. Frankly, I do believe that Dylan Gabriel is the best quarterback in America and maybe the most valuable player on a given team this season. But his numbers, you know, which, by the way, I thought in midseason he would have even greater numbers than he has. They became, you know, more of a running football team, and their defense played great as well. And I think to a certain extent when they struggled a little bit in that game with Wisconsin, that may have hurt Dylan just a little bit. I still think he's as valuable a player to a team as there is out there. I'm glad he's gotten invited. He deserves it because he's a great leader and he's a great kid. And I'm glad he's there. But if you had said to me that just Jeanty and Travis Hunter were the only 2 going, I would have understood that. Because in my estimation, this is going to be very close between the 2 of them, and then there'll be probably a significant drop-off to Dylan as well. And, you know, not to throw shade at anybody else. I know the kid at Army was another one that a lot of people wanted to see get invited just because he's such a great kid and a great story of the Army team. But ultimately, you know, in my mind, and I'm not going to give up who I voted for either. I don't want the Heisman Trust on my case either. But there's no denying that what Travis did at Colorado is something that we've never seen. And by the way, I called games that Champ Bailey played in at Georgia, and I certainly covered Charles Woodson, albeit I was in the SEC covering Peyton Manning in those days, but I knew what Charles was doing. But what Hunter's doing surpasses what either one of those guys ever did. As players that could beat you in that many different ways in a game. But ultimately, I think what you have to take into consideration, and it's a vague definition, okay, of what constitutes winning the Heisman, you know, most outstanding, how you define it. And for those of us that look at value to a team and where that team might be, were it not for that given player, I think that you can probably get an indication of which direction I might have been leaning.
The only thing I wish would have happened, and they didn't do it, they didn't have to, but with Jeanty and also Travis Hunter returning punts and or kicks like Tim Brown, Charles Woodson, Johnny Rogers, et cetera, Desmond Howard. But my God, they both were obviously very special. Paul, you have anything else for Tim? Craig, anything else for Tim? Now, you're transitioning into basketball. We have another guest coming up in a little bit, but you're transitioning into basketball. What is that like for you? I did that back when I broadcast from football and the JUCO basketball, which was fun. But what is that like for you to go from one to the other? Is it just like no big deal? You're just putting on another shirt you put on 1,000 other times?
Actually, it's refreshing because you guys know this. I'm in a much better frame of mind this year for the postseason than I was last. I'm not as disgusted as I was a year ago for obvious reasons, but I'm still always a little bit disappointed that my college football season ends a little too soon. You know, I haven't done a bowl game in a long, long time. I did the Fiesta Bowl in 1998. That was the last bowl game that I had a chance to do when CBS had the Alliance. And, you know, all the bowls, I mean, we had a Holiday Bowl, and that's it at Fox. I think the Sun Bowl may still be on CBS, and I think everything else is on ESPN. So for us, and for me specifically, it always ends too soon. College football ends too soon. Basketball, you can argue, starts too soon, but by the same token, I'm always glad as soon as it's over. Like, for instance, this past week, Fox didn't even have the Big Ten championship, and part of the new deal, CBS had the title game. So Fox had to have some alternative programming. What did they do? They put 4 of the top women's programs on in a made-for-television event called the Shark Beauty Women's Champions Classic. And Sarah Kustok and I called UConn, Louisville, Tennessee, and Iowa. Had a blast. Had an absolute blast. Big-time environment. Gino Auriemma and I got a chance to talk. I met the new young coach at Tennessee who happens to be pregnant, 8 months pregnant, and coaching a basketball team. And I just always find it refreshing to meet with the coaches both before they play, the day before they play, and then go to the shoot-arounds. That's true in the men's game as well as the women's game. This week I'll be up in the Big East Big Ten, actually, Big Ten Big East matchup with Seton Hall playing at Rutgers. Rutgers has got 2 of the best freshmen in the country. They're going to be really good. Steve Peichel's got a heck of a team. They've lost a couple of games lately, but they're really good. And then the following week, Donnie Marshall and I will be up at Providence for Rick Pitino's comeback. He'll be coming back to the Friars, the team that he took to the Final Four in '87. And his Johnnies look pretty good and could be a tournament team at long last. And we'll have them on the Friday night game, the Fox Friday night matchup on the 20th of December. But I'm always refreshed to go to a sport where they get it right at the end, and the coaches are always approachable and don't mind talking to you on the very day of the game. It's such a departure from the regimented, part of college football today. How difficult it is to schedule opportunities to meet with a lot of the head coaches, not all, but a lot of them. To get to their coordinators. It's so regimented. Whereas in basketball, it's so much more relaxed, casual. And, I've been doing basketball games for so long and was so involved with the NCAAs that, as you can understand, David, I don't walk into a room very often when people don't already know me. And when they already know you, that's half the battle. You begin the conversation, further along than you would if you were introducing yourself to somebody. So, I love jumping right into it. Like I would have, if I had been home on Saturday and all these title games had been playing, if you think back to all those years when Spencer and I would have been at the SEC championship, and now we're not, I probably would have missed it. I probably would have been a little melancholy. But when you got games to do, man, you got games to do. The show must go on. And I love performing, whether the game is football, basketball. Hell, I've done 23 other sports that I didn't even know were sports, some of them, and I loved every bit of it. Just going on the air and telling the story of the players and the coaches is something that I love to do. And if I'm not doing what I'd really, really, really want to do, I'd still prefer doing something else to keep me busy so I'm not missing or getting a little melancholy about where I once was and now I'm not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I love it. I absolutely love it.
Tim, we love having you on, man. The chat room always loves having your opinion. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of the week, and we'll talk to you again soon.
You got it.
Thank you.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas to all of you.
Tim Brando, Fox Sports, with us from football to basketball. And I used to love doing JUCO basketball. It was faster, and the games weren't as long. Not that I mind a long game, but we appreciate his time with us today on the playoff, the Heisman, and college football in general. When we come back, Hall of Famer John McClain, the NFL, and more. This is 365 Sports. Waco Custom Marketplace, full-service butcher shop, beef, pork, poultry, and seafood. Waco Custom Marketplace on Lake Air Drive in Waco has a full-service bakery with fresh baked bread and kolaches every single day. And they also have other sweets that they have, like pies and cakes and cookies, etc., that is available for you. They have up and down the aisles. There's like 2 or 3 aisles on front. Yeah, there's 2 aisles on either side. They go for about maybe 25 or 30 feet from anything you might need, from Rotel tomatoes to marinades and seasonings, from pasta to even some nice candy if you want that too. And then on top of that, they have fresh vegetables near the back in front of the butcher shop, tri-tip and brisket. They have big old like troughs of the big, large pieces of any kind of beef that you might cook for a special occasion. It's Waco Custom Marketplace, fresh and cold fresh. A cold beer and wine, 425 Lake Air Drive in Waco.
How did Edward Jones become one of the biggest financial service companies in the world? By not acting that way. Financial strategies, one-on-one advice, it's a big difference. And that's why Brad Wilson, your Edward Jones financial advisor, makes sense of investing. Experience the difference for yourself. Brad Wilson, 250 Sharon Drive in Woodway, 254-776-4337. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
Ready to take your business to the next level? Carrion Solutions has got you covered. We deliver world-class IT consulting, including Quest On Demand and Migration Manager, M365 and Exchange migrations, Active Directory assessments, security hardening, and Windows Server upgrades. Our experts specialize in consulting, monitoring, support, and managed IT services. We promise vision, professionalism, and unbeatable value. Satisfaction guaranteed. If you're not happy, we make it right. Remember the name Carrion Solutions. For more info, email sales@carrionsolutions.com or visit carrionsolutions.com. That's CARRION solutions.com. Carrion Solutions IT success guaranteed.
With so many companies and policies out there, it gets so confusing shopping for insurance, and I never know if I'm getting the policy that's right for me. Luckily, I met the team at the Niche Group Insurance Agency. With the Niche Group, you can go to one company and get access to coverage options from many insurance carriers, and you get to speak to a real person about your specific coverage needs. With the Niche Group, I know I'm getting the right coverage at the right price. If you need insurance, talk to the experts at the Niche Group at 1-800-258-8302.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
The 5 o'clock hour is sponsored by Edward Jones Investments with financial advisor Brad Wilson. Investing is time and experience back to you and your money during today's changing times. Edward Jones, making sense of investing.
Now, here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
John McClain appears on talk radio in segments in Houston, where he resides, Nashville, Knoxville, Las Vegas, San Antonio, Austin, and here has been with us with our show when Paul and I were on the radio since 2010, and now with the podcast 365 Sports. John, the end of that game last night, I immediately thought about Leon Lett when the Cowboys had the punt block and then they had the illegal touch. What was your thought about? Did you go straight to Leon Lett too?
Let's see. After I dozed off and kind of woke up a little bit, and I saw that poor guy bounce off his shoulder, and of course I thought about him. But that was a good Cowboys team. This team's terrible. And although, and I did feel sorry for him, you know, you're trying to make a play, and they go over that kind of stuff in practice. They go over at meetings, telling players, get out of the way. Fossil screaming on the sideline. Everybody's screaming, but it happens so fast. And I actually felt sorry for the Cowboys. You know, Joe Burrow, had no business, as well as he's playing, for that game to be that close. You know, Joe Burrow versus Cooper Rush versus Joe Burrow, it's a mismatch. But the one thing that I think is interesting, watching the Cowboys down the stretch, is they're finally getting some production out of Rico Dowdle behind a bad offensive line. They did not get it when the teams counted more during the season. So are they going to believe in him again after he's produced a little bit? Or are they going to make an effort to go out and get a running back like if Ashton Jeanty is available when they pick in the first round? And they blew it last offseason. Now we'll see if they blow it again or if Dowdle can reward their faith in him. And I'll say this about losing. Every team that's not in a playoff race, and the Cowboys are not, every time you lose, it just enhances your draft spot, and that's important because it can be the difference in a Micah Parsons and a Quincy Carter. So Cowboy fans who are so down right now, just keep thinking about the draft.
Well, one, John, I don't think anybody told the Cowboys, they're not going to stop trying, but every time they win, I get a little depressed that they're not going to get an Ashton Jeanty or something. But the issue, this is the way I see it, and this is not a knock on Rico Dowdle. It's more a knock on their organizational preparedness and the way that they look at things. If Rico Dowdle is back next year and signed to a long-term deal before the draft, that's a bad thing for the Cowboys. They're not going to get any better if that's their plan of action. Now, if they draft somebody and bring Rico Dowdle back together, that's better, but that's not normally how they do things. If they fall in love with Rico Dowdle because of 3 or 4 good games, which is the Miles Austin curse, they're just going to do the same thing that they've done again.
Well, I think that all Cowboy fans wouldn't be a bit surprised if that's what happened. And but I'll say this, they need to stockpile some talent. They need to have a good talent where they get multiple players to contribute, multiple starters eventually. And the way you start that off is with a high draft choice in a draft that is has a lot of players at a bunch of positions besides quarterback.
John, Kansas City is winning, and my God, that's the whole reason you play the games. And who knows, as long as they get the last possession or within 7 points or maybe even 8 or 2, they're going to win if Patrick Mahomes, of course, is healthy. Have you ever seen anything like it, though? It's almost every single week. They're down 2, they're down 6. They have the ball at the end of the game, and Mahomes leads them down to whatever the hell they need.
It's pretty clear that God has become a Chiefs fan because there's no way you can explain what's happened to that team. And it's not that they're winning ugly. No, they're winning on huge breaks. Now, you create your breaks or your opponents create your breaks for you. Remember last year, they lost 6 games in regular season, and everybody thought, well, they're not going to win the Super Bowl. Then they flipped the switch, and they did. And this year, I don't know if they're capable of flipping a switch. These breaks that they keep getting at the end, is it going to be impossible to sustain once you get in the playoffs? But they, to me, are not a great team. They got a great quarterback. Mahomes just had a rating of 88. Never usually get lost, and they won the game. He's not first-team All-Pro quarterback this year. That's going to be Josh Allen, but that doesn't mean squat in the playoffs. And it is amazing the way they're winning. But right now, to me, Detroit is the best team in the NFC. They could still lose the division to Minnesota. They play the last game of the season. And Buffalo is, to me, the best team in the AFC, but now they could lose 2 in a row, losing to Detroit. And who would have thought Pittsburgh, with nobody believing in Russell Wilson other than Mike Tomlin and his offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, who deserves a lot more credit for Russell Wilson's performance than Mike Tomlin. Tomlin just made the decision, but Arthur Smith calls the plays and helps coach him. So right now, to me, Mike Tomlin would be coach of the year. And the Steelers, the way they play defense, they can run. Russell Wilson's played in bad weather. He knows what it's like. They're going to be hard to beat in the playoffs.
What do you think of the renaissance of Sam Darnold in Minnesota?
I think you talk about timing, Craig. My goodness, he signed a 1-year, $10 million deal to be the bridge quarterback for rookie J.J. McCarthy. Last year, he's in San Francisco. Didn't get to play a lot behind Brock Purdy. Had signed 1 year, $4.5 million, and finally, it's paid off. J.J. goes down for the season. He has 28 touchdown passes, 5 on Sunday. There's no way Minnesota is going, I don't think, to commit a long-term contract to him that will require McCarthy to sit on the bench for multiple years. Or you try to trade McCarthy to a team that had him highly rated when he came out of Michigan this year. But it's a good problem to have, but I just don't see Minnesota giving him a 5-year contract for $40 million a year. You put him on the open market with all these desperate teams to get a quarterback with Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward as the top 2 prospects, and neither might be as good as the guys that came out this year. Sam Darnold, wouldn't you like to be his agent?
Absolutely. Speaking of that, the Heisman has their 4 finalists, Hunter and Genty, Dylan Gabriel, and Cam Ward. I know what Travis Hunter will be very, very quickly taken, whatever number that might be in the draft. Where do you see Genty, and where do you see maybe a Cam Ward, or what have you heard much about Dylan Gabriel when it comes to NFL teams?
Nobody's really high on Dylan Gabriel. He lacks size, but the other 2 they are. But so much can change in the off season. You got Senior Bowl workouts, combine, pro days, private workouts, lunches and dinners when players can woo NFL teams in their shorts and a T-shirt. But Ashton Jennings, when you see how great some of these running backs are doing this year, I think people will be more likely to draft him. And that kid's about to surpass Barry Sanders' record for yards. Now, he has more games, of course, but he's special. And if you're a Cowboys fan, you should want the Cowboys to get him because Rico Dowd couldn't carry his jock. And he can win games. He can score from anywhere on the field. It bothers me on the Heisman. Why do they take 4? Why can't they take 5 or 6? Cam Scatterbo deserves to be there. Shedeur Sanders should be a Heisman finalist too. What does it hurt them to take 5, 6, or 10 up there?
You want my reasoning?
Yeah.
And I've asked that question before, and I'm fortunate enough to vote. But it's become all these shows have these lead-up shows that take already an hour and a half to 2 hours to get to the decision, the announcement. And so I think it is also something that TV wants to maybe downplay how many are invited, even if they're good enough to be there, because, my God, there's already so many features and interviews and all of that. And I just think that would blow their mind. They would, oh, my God, we got to do 2 more features. They could do the features, but I think it comes down to the time. And they have plenty of time because it seemed like, for 2 hours.
They think they can do anything they want to do, and it just doesn't seem fair. How did they arrive at 4? And, yes, we know it's going to go to Travis Hunter, Ashton Jennings, but you still have a great time meeting all those Heisman Trophy winners. You might even get in one of those Heisman House commercials, and I think it's a great experience. Nobody would pass up. Even agents would recommend they go.
John, your beloved Baylor Bears are coming to visit you and play LSU in the Texas Bowl. How fired up are you for that?
I am. I'm writing a column about it on HoustonTexans.com for Friday. My first bowl game I went to was Baylor and LSU when I was a kid and came to Houston. And Baylor people are buying up those tickets like crazy. I like the fact it's usually New Year's Eve. And I go because I've got responsibilities and the Gridiron Legends of Texas. We welcome a new class this year of Eric Dickerson, John Randall, James Francis, the great Baylor defensive end, Tony Franklin, the kicker. And so it's an honor to be part of that. And I'm told Baylor people are buying up those tickets like crazy. And, once the LSU fans who are from Louisiana, but we have more LSU fans in Houston than Baton Rouge. And once they figure out the game's in the afternoon, they get drunk all night after it, although they never need an excuse to get drunk. I think they're going to have a huge crowd because Baylor people are fired up that Baylor's in the bowl, and I can't wait to watch it, averaging 41.3 points over those last 6 games. I can't wait to watch them, and what a coup it would be to go 9-4, finish with 7 wins in a row, and beat the hell out of LSU. And I think, what would it be if Texas played Arizona State? And everybody's picking Texas to move on. And what if the Sun Devils from the Big 12 beat the Longhorns from the SEC? That would be not as important to me as Baylor winning, but it would be a close second.
Well, John, thank you very much for your show. I know that a lot of what could change the future when it comes to the college football playoff and who makes it, it sure wouldn't hurt, whether it's Texas or somebody else, if someone beat those type of teams rather than the same status quo that we see. Like when TCU upset Michigan, they need to do that every year, and now even more with 12 teams involved. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you, guys. Take them Bears.
John McClain, Hall of Fame columnist with us, 365 Sports, and that leads us to what is next, and that's Paul Catalina's Top 5.
For Paul Catalina's Top 5, brought to you by Texas Beef House. Where's the best beef in Texas? Your house when you order from Texas Beef House. Unleash the flavor of Texas raised Wagyu. From our pasture to your plate, TexasBeefHouse.com.
Welcome into 365 Sports. Paul Catalina, the Top 5, brought to you by Texas Beef House. We're continuing with our transfer fits. The portal is wide open. I consider myself an expert on where people should go. Do they listen to me? Rarely ever, but they should. And they should watch these videos. So if you're in the portal and you're wondering where you should go and you happen to be one of these 5 guys, you're welcome, buddy. Got your back. Number 5, defensive end Will Helt from Purdue. Purdue, with Ryan Walters getting fired, they had some good recruiting classes and some really highly thought of people, but had a really, really bad year. If I'm Will Helt, I'm looking not too far away in the Big Ten in Nebraska. They've lost some guys. With Tony White leaving, I would jump into that Nebraska pool really quickly because he could star in Matt Rule's system, and we'll see, how many offers this guy gets, but so far the number 1 defensive end available, he will have his choice with 3 years of eligibility remaining. Number 4, cornerback Matthew McDoom, which is a badass name. Honestly, with Dr. Doom coming back to the MCU, they need to make an NIL deal with him to do a commercial with Robert Downey Jr. The biggest need for Miami, after they find whoever their quarterback is going to be, is that secondary. They got burnt all year long. Their defense was not good. Expect wholesale changes on that side of the ball for Mario Cristobal. And if I'm them, I'm giving Matthew McDoom a call because this is a guy who defends a lot of passes. He gets his hands on the ball. He's a really good player. That's him right there, by the way, number 16, in case you were wondering, for the Chanticleers. But if I were Miami, he would be one of my first calls. Number 3, quarterback Devin Brown. top 45 recruit in 2022. Wound up at Ohio State, was very loyal, played there, started the Cotton Bowl for them last year. Of course, that was a losing effort in a massive wave of opt-outs. I actually, from what I've seen from this guy, I think he's got still has some Big Ten potential. I also, maybe I'm a little biased because he's a quarterback who wears number 33. I'm not going to leave that part out, but with Jeff Grimes on his way to Wisconsin to run the wide zone, I think Devin Brown is the perfect wide zone quarterback. I think he can do very well for Luke Fickell and for Jeff Grimes in that offense for the Badgers. He stays in the Big Ten. He's familiar with it. He's a good leader. He's a gamer. He's a team player, because a lot of guys would have transferred 2 years ago when they saw the writing on the wall, or when they brought in Will Howard would have just left right then. He didn't. He stuck it out. He battled. He was the backup this year. He's played with some elite talent, practiced some elite talent. I think you bring that experience and moxie to Wisconsin if you're Luke Fickell, even if it's just for a short time. Plus, he's a quarterback who was 33. Let's make this cool. Let's make this cool. Number 2, quarterback Braylon Braxton from Marshall. I think he follows his coach Charles Huff to Southern Miss. Marshall really messed up by not getting this guy locked in. Of course, Southern Miss really motivated to get Charles Huff there. Braylon Braxton had a really good year. I think he follows his coach to Southern Miss, where it's a little bit warmer, and he's familiar with the system, but I think this is a great fit. If he doesn't, he will have a lot of options because he did have a really good year. And number 1, wide receiver Eric Singleton from Georgia Tech. He's already visiting Georgia. He's going to have options to visit other places, but I'm just going to tell you, they need a playmaking wide receiver like this for the Dogs really, really bad. Really, really bad. And they didn't have that this year. And you can see how the offense, really took a step back because of it. They didn't have those playmakers. They lost him. He is one of those playmakers. I say he moves across to the rival and goes to UGA because I think that's a huge fit for him. But we'll see what UGG has got in store, or if somebody else swoops in and gets him. He's going to be able to make a lot of money because he's one of the best wide receivers on the market. And Georgia's already trying to steal him from their rival. That's going to do it for this edition of the Top 5. Smokey, let's say Auf Wiedersehen.
All right, Auf Wiedersehen. Thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate that. Garrett Ross and Emery Winter with what you do, and your thoughts as well, Paul, Catalina, and Craig Smoak, and mine a little bit too. I told everybody I am now the traffic cop. When I have an opinion, I'll throw it out there, but I love weaving back. By the way, what Craig's been doing to kind of help set up each day, Paul, with all the production work and graphics along with Garrett. Andrew, is that right, the intern?
Yeah.
And all of that goes with us.
Garrett did all the graphics today.
Who did?
Garrett knocked them all out today.
He's growing up, man.
Trying.
Going into middle school pretty soon. Be great. Thank you, everybody in the chat. Those of you who watch us on Twitter at 365 Sports YT and the app, our Sikkim 365 app. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm David Smoak. Have a great night. We'll be back tomorrow. Triple option at 1. We're back here 3 to 6. Have a great night.